A man is descending the stairs, heading towards the inner part of the temple, and soon comes face to face with a huge creature with large horns protruding from its head. The beast begins to roar, furiously, as if it were ready to attack the intruder. In the distance, large magic circles can be seen, seeming to emerge from where they were standing. The young man looks deeply thoughtful, as if he were lamenting something that had happened in his life. He kneels to touch the ground with his hands and use his power. A cold energy, blue, begins to circulate around his body. That cold was enough to freeze the entire land, covering it effortlessly, as if lulling it to sleep. Once his power fully manifests, a huge, female figure appears behind him. Little by little, that place begins to be covered in ice, and the creature that was once aggressive now seems very uncomfortable with the change in temperature. That woman gently blows towards it, and the creature is frozen in a large block of ice. Just as the conflict began, it was brought to an end. The young man looks at the bright sky as the icy energy he summoned slowly fades. His gaze is filled with determination because his task is not yet over. The Sin family is among the most powerful in Korea when it comes of magic, and, even among them, the protagonist is exceptionally gifted, at least until the day of the accident. Ayul's father asks if he understood everything he heard. The young man confirms that he did, stating that he is the third son of this prestigious family, saying that he will bring results worthy of his family's reputation, as he plans to graduate at the top of his class and become the best mage in the world. The patriarch acknowledges that the boy possesses a potential unmatched by anyone. He is far superior to his own brothers and eagerly awaits to see the results, wishing for his son to become the pinnacle of magic itself. That is exactly what the boy intends to do, determined to prove to his father that he will not fail under any circumstances. The patriarch of the family is currently the most powerful mage in the nation. Since that conversation 2 years ago, time has passed, and he now attends Obelisk Academy. A professor asks the second-year students to gather with the others because today there will be a practical exam. He tells Saiuk to get ready, as he will go first, and tells him there is no need to be nervous. But the boy arrogantly replies that he has no reason to feel that way, since the bottom half of the class has already been decided. Among them is the protagonist, a loser who can't even use basic magic, and the arrogant student doesn't know how he even made it to the second year, claiming that he is a useless piece of trash who can't do the simplest things. In the current world, mages are not only rare, but also incredibly valuable. The practical exam begins, and digital beasts materialize automatically in front of the arrogant student. He attacks them using fire magic, proving to be extremely effective. He completed the exam well within the time limit. He passes, but still takes the opportunity to say that it was easier than expected. With artificial intelligence, magic has become simpler. All mages, they have chips implanted in their bodies that help with summoning. But our protagonist is not compatible with this. Now it's his turn to be tested. The beasts have already materialized, and the boy begins to gather mana in his hands. This is the fundamental source of magic. It must be channeled through the heart and then processed through the 8 steps of the magic formula. But since it takes time to complete this long process, the creatures begin to attack. Watching the test are his classmates, including the arrogant student, who is enjoying the moment of his failure. Ayul is worried about the exam, but also irritated by the comments, since he is a mage considered obsolete in modern times. Unfortunately, he doesn't complete the exam in the required time and fails to get a passing grade. Shamelessly, his classmates begin to laugh at his failure, while the boy deeply regrets not being able to succeed. But not everything is bad. Compared to his previous performance, he managed to increase his summoning speed. As soon as they found out he couldn't use artificial intelligence, his father abandoned all expectations, even giving him medicine to destroy his mana circle. But the boy refuses to give up on his dreams. Being outdated, he can only learn through ancient books. Given the enormous amount of material he owns, he really wishes he could read it all on a screen, as he no longer has space to store everything. While lost in his thoughts, he comes across a peculiar book, one he doesn't remember ever buying. He decided to pick it up with his hands to examine its contents. The book is quite old, but it's strangely well adorned. In fact, it looks like something very expensive. Trying to understand its words, he has no idea what it could be, because the handwriting is terrible, until he comes across a well-known name, Baitneo. This person was the first great mage of humanity and the first emperor of his kingdom. He is considered the creator of all magic. When our protagonist was just a child, he used to read many books that told parts of this man's biography. While he was immersed in his memories, the book began to glow subtly, still in his hands, until the luminous energy grew so bright that he had to squint. Dropping the book to the floor, he started to wonder what that was. And to his surprise, the book didn't even fall. The light kept getting stronger, making the boy feel even more intrigued. A voice began to emerge from those pages, speaking to the one who shares the same constitution and is able to hear it. Botenio himself was leaving this book for him. Realizing what was happening, the boy began to wonder about the identity of that voice. Once again, he was carried away by his memories. Back then, he didn't yet know that for being an outcast he would receive the greatest of gifts. The professor said that the students who failed the test that day would need extra classes. Some began to wonder if anyone had actually failed, until they pointed at our protagonist. He couldn't use it and endured all that without any power, never imagining that one day he could be revived. After that experience, a new day dawned, and the students were in the cafeteria having breakfast. Sitting at one of the tables is our protagonist, and no one is with him, until a boy approached him asking if he was going to eat alone again. Accepting the presence of this other person, he was surprised that he came too. The boy with tied-up hair said the protagonist's food looked really good. His name is Jisun-chan, and the first impression he gives might be of someone a bit foolish, but he is one of the top 10 talents in that academy, and became a third-circle mage at 18 years old. He's actually very skilled. Now the two of them are at the same table sharing a meal, and the clumsy boy is putting on his plate what the protagonist didn't eat. Within that academy, he is the only one the protagonist can call a friend. Sun-chan told his friend that if he had any problems, he just had to say so, and it would be solved immediately. He said everything was fine, that there was no need for that sort of thing, but he mentioned finding a very strange book the day before. A very strange book, and everything after page 3 was completely blank. The book said something about Botenio, but since there was nothing written beyond that, he thought that maybe one of the other students had done something to it. However, he heard a voice coming from its pages. The words said that Botenio was leaving his magic to whoever succeeded him or something like that, and that anyone who didn't have the same constitution wouldn't even be able to open it. Sun-chan found that very curious, and asked if he could try to open it too, but the protagonist hadn't finished sharing his information. There was something written on the last page. It said that one must die first, and after that macabre news, his friend became worried. The words continued. It wasn't about the heart, but that it was necessary to create a mana circle in one's own brain. Sun-chan realized immediately that this could be fatal, and suggested inspecting the book before doing anything else. Night fell over the academy, and now the two of them were inside the protagonist's dorm room. His friend would try to open the book. With it in his hands, he tried to force the pages open with all his might. After giving up, he realized it wouldn't be possible to open it. There was probably some kind of magic preventing it. Since he was no longer interested in it, he said goodbye to the protagonist, wishing him a good night. The door closed quickly, and the boy was left completely alone. The book was already open in his hands, and he contemplated some of its notes. After witnessing his friend's effort, he felt even more intrigued that he could open the book with such ease. Some symbols began to appear before his eyes. He noticed that those pages had been blank. Once again, the voice returned, speaking directly to its successor if the hypothesis was correct. It said that he was most likely using a mana circle in the heart to invoke magic. For normal people, that must be the way, but for people like them, that was not the correct method. As soon as he finished absorbing the information, the book glowed and began to levitate once more. If he was willing to accept its will and ready to become a disciple, he had to destroy the mana circle in his heart and recreate a mana circle inside his brain. After doing that, he would have to open the book again to receive further instructions. Our protagonist began to think this was a cruel joke, as he was being led to perform an act of madness. The source of all magic is extremely toxic to the brain, since mana can cause the collapse of the mind, possibly resulting in brain death. In other words, if he tried to do that, he would almost certainly suffer an agonizing death. Turning his back on the scriptures, he said that no one would be crazy enough to do it, leaving the book abandoned, lying on his room's floor. At dawn the next day, a professor asked the protagonist what was going on with him. The young man had brought that mysterious book to the professor so it could be examined. Inspecting the cover, he noticed it was written in an ancient language. At first glance, it looked quite old. Wanting to know exactly what he was supposed to examine, the boy asked the professor to try and open it and confirm if it was magically sealed, pointing out that lately there had been a strange atmosphere among the students. The professor advised him to pay more attention to his studies instead of rumors, but for now, he should focus. He was carefully examining the book, looking for any sign of magic. Handing the book back, he said there was no magic present and once again urged the boy to focus more on his studies. Our protagonist became even more thoughtful. His friend couldn't open the book. After being examined by a professor, nothing was found. But that didn't scare him. In fact, it made him consider the possibility that the book might be real. Once again, in his room, he is examining that mysterious book. In one of his hands are the pills his father gave him, capable of destroying his mana circle. The advice he received from the patriarch was to forget about magic and focus on theory. But this leap of faith he's about to take isn't to give up, it's to go even further. Still, swallowing those pills is terrifying, since he doesn't know if the book is telling the truth. As he has few options to achieve his dreams, he decides to take the pills anyway, because on that day, he was going to die. After swallowing the pills, he starts to feel pain all over his body, and he can feel the mana circle in his heart being completely destroyed. That pain means the death of a mage. From this moment on, what he is about to do is completely forbidden, attempting to establish a mana circle inside his brain. He was now living again as a mage. As magic begins to circulate through his head, the pain starts to fade. It was so intense that the boy thought he was going to die, and for a moment, he really believed he would, until he heard a whisper from someone else. He felt as if hands were drawing near his ears. The voice asked if future generations could hear it, and our protagonist realized it was the same voice from the book. He could feel the change occurring in his body, as if the spirits responsible for mana were dancing and coexisting. He could perceive everything those voices were doing. They were smiling and singing as if they were blessing him. Only then, he opened his eyes, realizing he had fallen to the ground. The boy immediately shot up, trying to understand if he was really alive, until he looked at the book beside him that had decided to open on its own. Examining its contents, he noticed once again that some of the pages that had been blank were now filled with writing, and the voice coming from it was becoming clearer and clearer. It congratulated the boy for taking his first steps. Only then did the voice reveal the book's name. It was called Idrit. From that moment on, the legend of our protagonist would begin through that book. The mysterious voice said it would leave all its magic to our protagonist for those who would come seeking its knowledge. From now on, the boy would be its disciple. Those words filled the protagonist with joy. Since that mysterious event, a few days had passed. Classes were proceeding normally within the academy, but the boy was completely engrossed in that mysterious book, as new notes continued to appear. He never imagined that learning magic could be so much fun. And Idret is full of diverse knowledge. There he learned that mana has its own malevolent will, and for most people, when it comes into contact with the brain, that will clashes with their own, driving them to madness. But the boy is different. His willpower is strong enough to suppress the will of mana, preventing his mind from collapsing. Now he understands why he can't work with AI, as his brain blocks the chip's interference. While he was deeply absorbed in his reading, the professor called for everyone's attention. Soon there would be an exam for the second-year students, but this time a new rule would be introduced. At this news, everyone began to listen very attentively. It stated that students who were unable to reach the minimum level would be expelled from the academy. This was personally proposed by the head of the Sin family. Upon hearing that, our protagonist became more serious, and the class idiot felt relieved. It was about time they got rid of the useless ones. The professor didn't even bother to hide that he was also pleased with it. Meanwhile, the protagonist grew increasingly thoughtful, pondering his father's intentions. Outside, under the glow of twilight, the students were heading home. The boy knew that renting simulation stations for training was very expensive. That place he had visited cost $200,000 per hour, and in his current situation, that was too much. Still, he decided to go in, being greeted by the receptionist. The boy said he would rent it for an hour, and the receptionist asked if he would be going in alone. After he confirmed, the receptionist gave him a card and asked him to go to room 14. There he would receive all the instructions, but the boy was already familiar with it and knew how to use the system. The receptionist knew he was from the Sin family, but she could only feel pity for him, knowing that the boy was incompatible with AI. Inside the training room, the simulation would begin and the wolf challenge was about to start. Several creatures materialized around our protagonist. Although none of it was real, their fury was highly convincing. They were low-level monsters, and facing 10 of them at once would not be easy. The average time at the academy for this was 12 minutes and 33 seconds. But ever since he changed his mana circle, the boy had been training daily following the instructions from that book. There was no better way to test his progress and what his new mana circle was capable of. Without wasting any time, he summoned an infinite circle that surrounded his body. The digitized creatures, which from now on will be called Digimons, began to attack, but the boy managed to summon a water barrier to protect himself. Observing their speed and power, he realized it was truly incredible, almost too amazing to believe. Ordinary mages use a mana circle in their hearts to be compatible with the AI, but now the protagonist could use his entire body for that function, channeling through his brain, and his latent magical potential had finally been unleashed. He could cast magic circles at an incredible speed. Then, the voice told him not to be impressed by such small things. He still had a long road of training ahead of him. The infinite circle was just the foundation of the Bait-Neo magic style. He had to control magic through the images formed in his mind. These were the instructions from the first book of the Bait-Neo magic style, the heart's intention. It didn't take long for his reserved hour to end. Upon leaving the facility, the receptionist thanked him and asked him to visit again. Heading to room 14 to clean it, the attendant just wanted to go home, but he became curious about how that renegade genius trained until he stumbled upon some very intriguing information. He had defeated the Digimons in under 7 minutes, a time that matched world-class competition levels. He thought it could only be fraud. Maybe the device was broken, and that's why he felt that kick was justified. On the way to his dorm, our protagonist felt more and more confident. This was the beginning of his own legend. To form his first circle, Sime, the process was very demanding. The notes in the book were completely different from everything he had learned so far. They said that mana is your arms and legs, your heart and your mind, and that it must move as you command. But it was difficult to find clarity in such vague words. It felt like trying to catch something that doesn't exist. Mages call this the barrier of enlightenment, when they encounter the limits of their own magic, something common in all eras. That's why he decided to focus on circulating mana throughout his entire body, just as it was written in the book. While he dedicated himself with fervor, he also wondered if this would be enough. He had already been doing this exercise for 10 hours. Normally, he would have lost consciousness by now from exhaustion, but that hadn't happened yet. The next day he headed to the academy as usual, and on the way, he ran into his friend, who greeted him. Seeing the exhausted expression on the protagonist's face, he asked if everything was all right with him. For the boy, concentrating on mana circulation is no easy task. He needs to get used to it, quickly to this new mana circle. At 12 years old, he reached the second circle and was immediately recognized as a prodigy. And now, all he can achieve is a single circle in his head, and he's thinking of ways to progress. Breaking the barrier of enlightenment is essential for that. At least that's what he used to hear from his father, back when he still had expectations for him. Perfection is nothing more than a chain, a lie born from human arrogance. But now, those words have a completely different meaning for him. Meditating once more, he could feel things differently. His attention was directed completely inward, toward his own body. Then, he began to feel the energy flowing through his hands and feet, as he thought that his heart and mind should move as he wished. A free imagination is fundamental for casting spells without a chant. That's how the chip makes life easier for mages. It's a very solid technique. The boy now tries to use his thoughts freely, able to create objects that can change shape freely, ignoring the structure of traditional forms. In this way, he managed to conjure several firebirds that flew around him. Since he only has one circle formed, that experience is extremely exhausting, but the result is impressive. He is already breaking the barrier of enlightenment, reaching even greater heights. One of the professors arrived at the classroom where the protagonist was, informing him that Ayul had visitors. He found it strange that someone had come all this way to see him. As they both walked down the hall toward the meeting room, the professor said it was the boy's father. He was already waiting for him in the visitor's room and asked him to come in. The professor informed him that he had brought the boy. Then, the patriarch turned around to examine him. Some time had passed since they had last seen each other. Knowing it was a private conversation, the professor said he would take his leave, leaving the two of them alone. Once seated, the patriarch began to talk about his son's attendance at the school. It seemed he hadn't taken the medicine he had been given, and, only then, the boy said that some things had happened. Now, he had made significant progress in his magical abilities. That left the patriarch discouraged, realizing his son was still chasing a hopeless dream, and the protagonist said that he was determined to become the greatest mage of the current era. Those words sounded too arrogant to the patriarch, who looked firmly at his son, but there wasn't the slightest hesitation in the boy. With a deep sigh, he said that his son had already wasted an entire year, and it was time for him to face reality. It doesn't matter how hard he tries, or what he might achieve in the future. If he's not compatible with the AI, there's no way for him to become a decent mage. Still, he has a unique talent. He could dedicate himself to theory, and even someone as out of place as him could make use of that talent. The boy ignored everything he had just heard and said, once again, that he would not give up on magic because he doesn't want to live an ordinary life like everyone else, and he also doesn't want to depend on his family's name or his father's influence. His goals are even greater. He wants to become the next head of the Midison family. That only left the patriarch even more silent, until he said that becoming a great mage or the head of a family is not something achieved by ambition alone. And with a confident smile on his face, the boy said he would prove his point. This only made his father more skeptical, as he knew his son was on the verge of being expelled from the academy. But the boy declared that he would place among the top 10 students in the upcoming exam, and if he failed, He would leave the academy to become a theoretical mage, just as his father advised him. However, if he succeeded, his father would have to acknowledge him and promise him all the support he needed in the future. That only made the old man more worried, thinking his son's latest achievement was developing unwarranted confidence. There was nothing more to be said, and he started to leave the room, telling his son he hoped this wouldn't be a meaningless accomplishment, leaving the boy deep in thought, although more confident than ever. A few more days passed and classes continued as normal. The professor was about to announce what kind of evaluation the students would be facing. Some students began to chat. Apparently, it's going to be a duel between classmates. The test will be a single elimination tournament between the students. It will start in 3 days. And, as expected in any story where the protagonist has a sudden development, there will be an audience during this test, which made the idiot very happy, since he doesn't know yet that he's just a side character. The professor wished for the students to do their best, and our protagonist knows his time to shine has come. The news spread quickly among the students, as even members of the Magic Tower will come to witness the duels. Our protagonist knows that this will create a huge impact. The presence of the Magic Tower also attracts the media. It is an organization formed by the 12 most powerful mages in the world. With the power of a nation, the dream of every young mage is to one day join it. It was then that the idiot approached him. He seemed curious about the protagonist's state and asked him how he had been. The boy said nothing, simply hiding his frustration. The idiot's name is Saiuk, a very rich and also very talented student. And, by the magical powers of plot convenience, the protagonist and the idiot will face each other during the exam. Trying to intimidate our protagonist, the idiot said he was totally finished and that he would finally get his revenge for what happened 5 years ago. A flashback takes us to that moment. It was the final tournament in the junior category. That idiot had lost miserably against our protagonist. When he found out the protagonist was an outcast, he started taking advantage of that, saying that soon he would be expelled. Now, the idiot was excited because he would have the chance to beat up the protagonist right before his expulsion. He would make sure to hit him so hard that he would go home crying. But the protagonist was confident. With the smile of someone armed with a Glock, he said he wouldn't be the one going home crying. Even though he acts like an idiot, the guy has zero resistance to provocation. It didn't take long for their argument attracted the attention of other students. The idiot said the protagonist must be completely insane, probably suffering from some kind of insurmountable mental issue. He claimed he didn't understand the situation and that he would beat him so hard he'd be turned inside out. But the protagonist was not affected by any of those words. He then remembered that 5 years ago, the idiot had acted the exact same way. In the end, he lost miserably. Apparently, time had passed for both of them, but the idiot hadn't improved his skills at all. Since his tolerance for insults was non-existent, the idiot started to get genuinely enraged, wanting to punch his rival right then and there. Even more cunningly, the protagonist apologized for making him feel bad, while calling him a coward. This pushed the idiot to the brink of insanity. He then grabbed our protagonist by the collar, calling him a huge fool and telling him he was ugly. But our protagonist was even sharper. He said that to fall, one must first climb something, a feat the idiot had never accomplished in his life. Besides, once a genius, always a genius. That is the truth that separates them, and he would make sure to teach that lesson properly during their duel. Finishing his words, the protagonist walked away as if nothing had happened, but the idiot was losing his composure, biting his nails non-stop, his ego completely shattered. Now he wants to incinerate the boy down to his very bones. The news about Ayul began to spread. The return of the genius, the fallen prodigy, the dark horse, that's what they were calling him. Reading the news, the boy also noticed they were talking about his rival, as he too came from a wealthy family. Knowing the idiot's personality, it was expected that he would do something about it. Many people were eagerly awaiting the prodigy's return during that exam, but for him, this wasn't a bad thing. He actually wants to be noticed by his peers. While he was lost in daydreams of victory, his phone began to ring. Upon answering, he began to speak with his father, saying he'd read the day's news. He told the old man not to worry about anything, that there was a new lion on that mountain now. But his father already knew his son well and asked if he was the one who caused all that commotion. The boy confirmed it. He provoked the idiot just to get more attention in the media. This made the patriarch regret what they had discussed. They didn't move forward with that challenge, not because they trusted their son, but because they believed there would be no defeat attached to the family name. Even with the boy's determination, the father doesn't believe his son will win, and now the family's reputation could be tarnished. The boy said the public already believes he was disowned, so the damage to the family's name would be minimized, but that isn't enough for his father, who is still disappointed, because wherever his son goes, the family name will follow, and the boy is well aware of that. But thinking about the potential gains, He believes the risk is worth it. Hearing this, the old man started to wonder if his son was smoking crack, because he has no idea what benefits they would get if his son actually won. And the boy said that he himself is the benefit, as he will become a more powerful mage, one of the strongest in history. The old man thinks that these are just youthful delusions, as if his son were already stronger than the tower mages. With no hope of making the boy see reason, he said he would let it be. On one condition, if he brought disgrace upon the family, he had to be prepared for the consequences, and so their cold interaction ended. But the protagonist is more confident than ever, because the stage for his performance was already set. The day of the evaluation finally arrived. Many people are present in the audience, including journalists and photographers. Our protagonist is one of the most well-known participants due to his last name. The idiot asked him if he had liked the article, since the Prodigy has always been popular and he can't wait to expose him in front of everyone, because there will be no time for him to cast any spell. Smiling calmly, the protagonist said that he wouldn't be the one who would lose that duel, and is very grateful that the idiot, without knowing it, helped execute his plan. Even after being provoked by the idiot, he said he doesn't care in the slightest, since the guy is nothing more than a nobody, and warned that he would end the fight quickly. That filled the idiot with rage, who thought his opponent had completely lost his mind, until the protagonist raised a single finger saying he would win the match with a first circle spell. The arena of Obelisk Academy is packed. Everyone heard the promise made by the Prodigy. In front of all those people, the idiot could only do one thing: get extremely angry. He can't stand being disrespected by trash like that. What he doesn't know is that he'll soon be spending a lot on therapy. This would be the first duel, and the referee gave the signal for them to begin. In front of all those stares, our slightly narcissistic protagonist was eager to start shining. The first move came from his opponent. It didn't take him long to understand what was happening. The fireball, which had been conjured, didn't even hit the protagonist. His desire to crush the protagonist is so intense that the chip implanted in his neck was overheating. Clearly it's not Intel, it must be RN. This time he was going to use a third circle spell, Explosion, something our protagonist had been eagerly awaiting. The catastrophic effect of the spell spreads throughout the entire arena. Inside the cloud of dust, no one knows what happened. The idiot started to gloat, convinced that the result was inevitable, but his arrogant monologue was immediately interrupted. Victory had not arrived. In front of him stood his opponent, with his clothes intact and no wounds on his body. Driven by rage, he tried to use an even more powerful spell to win, sending several fireballs towards our completely unfazed protagonist. He began to gather some water in the palm of his hand, creating a barrier that protected him from the fire attack. Even seeing all this, the little idiot couldn't accept that his attacks were ineffective. Moreover, they had all been blocked with great ease by his opponent. A mysterious person was watching all of this, reaching the conclusion that it was, indeed, quite strange, because that young man was casting first circle spells without any kind of incantation. His secretary asked him why he had rearranged his schedule just to witness a student duel. She asked if he knew anything about Ayul's magic, and the man replied that he didn't. All he knew was what he had read in the newspaper about the return of a prodigy. He had come solely out of curiosity, but his secretary refused to believe in such a coincidence. If it were known that the head of the Blue Magic Tower, an 8th Circle Mage, had come just to watch this duel, it would cause a huge stir. Trying to justify himself to his secretary, Kim said he was very aware of that, which was why he was in the room reserved for important people. While he was watching the match, another person entered the room. Kim greeted him politely, although he didn't expect that person to be there, as well. Inside the arena, our protagonist seems quite calm. The same can't be said for the idiot, whose most powerful magic was blocked with a first circle technique. He tries to replay the image in his mind, to understand what just happened. His opponent's casting speed is abnormally high. Knowing exactly what he must be thinking, the protagonist asked if he was curious, but the guy, clearly annoyed and with a wounded ego, told him to shut up, telling him to just die after the next attack. Completely oblivious to the reality before his eyes, the idiot used the same attack again. A huge explosion occurred on impact. Using the same approach and doing the same thing, he expected to get a different result, only to be brutally hit by reality, seeing that his opponent was still standing. But the protagonist's patience was also running out. Now it was his turn to go on the offensive. He forced the idiot to dodge a wind spear that almost grazed his head. That was concerning. The blow passed so close that the idiot almost lost his hair, and not only had he failed to do any damage, but he hadn't even noticed that his opponent had switched elements. So he went back to stroking his own ego, saying he wouldn't lose to first circle spells. But our protagonist disagreed. He would lose, and it would be humiliating. He threw another wind spear at him, but this time the guy had to summon a magic shield, noticing that his defense had worked. A glimmer of hope lit up his eyes and he began to mock our protagonist, saying that he shouldn't feel so confident just because he increased his casting speed. Unfortunately, his speech was cut short, as wind spears were already flying through the air. This time, the idiot was hit in the arm and had no idea how the protagonist managed to cast his spears so quickly. Now, he wanted to know what mysterious technique his opponent was using. The others watching the battle also wanted that answer, creating a small sphere of wind in one hand. Our protagonist said the idiot must be immune to knowledge, because his stupidity was truly terrifying, so he would show him how it's done. The sphere of wind transformed into a small bird that rushed swiftly towards the idiot. He couldn't tell what kind of thing it was, and if it was a wind spear, it shouldn't have a double hit ability. But our protagonist confirmed that it was exactly what he had, because he was able to shape them that way. It was up to the idiot to defend himself, since now there were 4 of them, and the birds flew cheerfully toward their target. The poor idiot thought that summoning a shield would be enough, only to be surprised by the force with which he was being hit. He believed that if he could block those attacks, he could still be victorious, until he felt a sharp pang right in his back. One of those spears had taken a different path, bypassing the shield. Our protagonist didn't stop taunting, saying that the idiot looked like a junkie going through withdrawal and that his beating session was just getting started. More wind birds were summoned and the idiot had to move to dodge them. Keeping his distance was his only option. Magical power is limited to a certain range. If he stayed far enough away, he thought he wouldn't be hit by any of those attacks. Our protagonist said that the decision he had made was, actually, quite a good one, and that's why it was time to change tactics. So he put his hands together. Strong winds began to form inside the arena, frightening the idiot. Soon everyone would smell what was coming from his underpants, the first item to be destroyed in this fight. An even larger wind bird had formed, something much more powerful. The leader of the Blue Tower was impressed. The Prodigy was not only casting quickly, he was also altering the trajectory of the spells in mid-air, something truly exceptional. Only then was the identity of the mysterious figure in the room revealed. It was our protagonist's father and the current head of the Midasson family, an 8th Circle Mage. The secretary confirmed that the Prodigy's magic was not obeying the rules they were subject to. The open source system. Open source magic follows certain criteria. The reverse slash, for example, has a maximum range of 38 meters, and its trajectory can only be altered once. In other words, open source magic only works according to pre-established parameters. Nowadays, mage duels resemble a mind game where each side tries to predict the opponent's moves, but our protagonist is on another level. He ignores all the limitations of modernity, and his great wind spear struck its target devastatingly. The impact had shattered the arena floor, and the idiot couldn't believe the trouble he was having. The protagonist said that his opponent was underestimating the capabilities of single-circle spells. If you end up exhausted from using your most powerful spells, then even a feather is enough to take someone's life. But he didn't expect a lesson in the middle of the fight, and the idiot was completely confused. Materializing a bit of water in his hands, the protagonist demonstrated a single-circle spell. He said that the principle of the feather also applies to magic. You don't need something complex to end a life. With that, the idiot's head was enveloped by a ball of water, cutting off his ability to breathe. The students' bodies are protected by their uniforms, which generate a magical barrier around them. Unfortunately, it seems, that material wasn't enough to prevent the idiot's suffering. He was already collapsed on the ground, in total despair, unable to breathe. Faced with the imminent victory, the entire arena fell silent. There was nothing else our protagonist needed to do to secure his triumph. Looking at the match referee, he said that the outcome was already very clear. Asking if he should continue his attacks, the referee declared the fight over, announcing to everyone who the winner was. Ayul, the poor idiot, had to be carried away, since he didn't even have the strength to walk. Our protagonist walked away calmly, knowing that he'd achieved his goals. Looking at his hand, he realized it had been a long time since he'd felt this. The thrill of winning a competition, which is incredibly satisfying. He had now returned to being the mage he once was. The head of the Blue Tower was walking through the halls thinking about what he had just witnessed. That truly was the return of a great prodigy. With intrigued eyes, he found the event very interesting and now wants to learn more about that young man. The protagonist's best friend immediately ran to him, having heard that his friend had won the match. He was eager to know what kind of training he had done. He was extremely impressed with the movement of the wind spears and how they combined with each other. Only then did the protagonist ask if his friend wanted to know the details, and he happily replied yes. Leaning close to his ear, he told him that he would reveal the truth. It was still a secret from everyone else. With his phone in hand, he asked if Juno was also watching. The interview he had given right after the match had already been published. Everyone wanted to know what that automatic casting he had shown was, asterisk, asterisk. How they wanted a plausible explanation for what their eyes had witnessed. They also wanted to know how he had changed the spear's trajectory. The head of the Blue Tower approached the boy and said that he had the answer to those questions. Upon seeing that man, the protagonist was immediately surprised. He didn't expect to see the Ice Demon King there. Kim said that he had seen the match and was very intrigued. He believed the boy must have used a fourth circle spell, asterisk, asterisk, memorize. To explain his reasoning, he began to summon flames with one of his hands. The reporters were instantly captivated by it. Kim explained that memorize allows you to prepare a spell to be cast instantly. The reporters wanted to know why it wasn't used more often. Kim said that memorize only works with spells 3 levels lower. Asking the protagonist if he was correct, the boy replied that he had hit the nail on the head. He didn't know how to explain the technique he had learned, but that explanation was absolutely perfect. One of the reporters asked if the boy was really in the 4th circle of magic. Kim continued to answer for him, confidently assuring them that the Prodigy was indeed at the 4th level. The reporters wouldn't stop taking pictures and asking everyone questions. Being at the 4th level at the protagonist's age is a great achievement, and with Kim's endorsement, few dared to doubt it. His best friend asked if it was really true, and he also had a few more questions. Now, one of the reporters wanted to know how he had managed to ignore the rules of open-source magic, as Kim was already struggling to give plausible answers, but the boy intervened, saying that ignoring the rules of open-source magic was surprisingly simple. He just had to alter the spell's formula, which left Kim quite impressed, because it's supposed to be impossible to alter a spell's formula. In other words, doing so is like putting wings on a car and expecting it to fly. Maybe it's possible, but it's definitely not easy. So, he started to think that if the boy were compatible with the AI, he could have an impressive future ahead of him. At that moment, the protagonist was deeply engrossed, explaining to the reporters how his magic worked. The spells, whose code he modified, were called modified magic. Chin was also watching what the boy was doing, becoming even more interested in him, because that was undeniably revolutionary in the world of magic. Its very foundations had been shaken. That's exactly what the article was about. But the protagonist's best friend wasn't buying that narrative, and wondered if he should really believe what he had heard. Even while struggling to accept the truth, he couldn't hide his joy. He was happy that his friend had come out victorious. Now that they had talked, he was returning to his dorm room. He needed to take care of his physical condition, since the opponent he would face the next day would be a challenge. Wondering who that person might be, the protagonist got lost in his thoughts. Once again, the duels resumed in the Academy's arena. Under the public's gaze, the protagonist's friend seemed to be having trouble. His opponent turned out to be formidable. Sitting in the audience, our protagonist identified who his friend's opponent was. She was the typical talented blonde girl who appears in every story. Her name was Adella, and at that moment, she was casting another spell. She was a prodigy of her family, representing 2 nations, France and Korea. At least that way, they gave an explanation for the blonde hair and blue eyes. Her magic was truly unique, and there was a reason for it. Lunar elemental magic, a secret technique of the girl's family. Our protagonist's friend was having a hard time, and the blonde girl didn't take long to attack him again, causing the boy to fall to the ground. After a brief show of force, the match ended. The girl was declared the winner of the fight. Our protagonist watched everything very carefully. His eyes remained fixed the entire time. That secret technique used both light and darkness, and it wasn't registered in the open-source magic, so its range and power were unknown. Definitely, fighting against her wouldn't be easy. It was then that the boy began to feel that he was being watched. The blonde girl was staring at him intently. Our protagonist began to wonder if that was really happening. Later, he went to meet his friend, who was frustrated by the defeat. Even so, the protagonist congratulated him on his effort, but the words failed to cheer him up. He hadn't expected to face one of the tougher opponents right in the first round. Shaking off the sadness, he asked if the protagonist had won his second match, and he answered that he had. So now they knew who he would face next, but their conversation was interrupted by the French girl, who also came to congratulate the protagonist's friend. He thanked her very much for her words, but the girl was clearly focused on something else. Our protagonist still felt like he was being watched. She knew that the boy was returning to the true path a mage must follow, one that should never be abandoned. As they were talking, She decided to reveal the reason why she had enrolled in the academy, and hoped the protagonist could help her with it. Our protagonist and the girl had known each other long before entering that academy. Their families had a good relationship, so they had met several times, and the relationship between them was one of rivalry. The girl had left her studies in France just to surpass her little rival. However, everything changed when he revealed he was completely incompatible with AI, and they hadn't spoken again since then. That was a huge blow to her, since she could no longer surpass the rival she had known all her life. In a friendly tone, he said it was no longer worth her seeing him as a goal to overcome. Adella ignored those words and said they would confirm it only after they fought. The protagonist's friend became very worried, as he didn't know if the boy was ready for that. Given his carefree response, the friend became even more worried about our protagonist, because he wasn't aware of the rumors. That girl would be his next opponent in the competition. As soon as he found out, our protagonist became a little worried, because it wasn't something he had been expecting. Finally, on another day of competition at the academy, the girl looked extremely determined, ready to surpass her rival once and for all. Ayul still hadn't arrived at the arena, and some students jealous from the audience started saying that he must have run away, since he was scared to death. They said he was all talk and that when he realized he couldn't win, he decided to withdraw from the competition. Indeed, his delay was already becoming unreasonable, and the referee entered the arena to give his verdict. Adella had won due to her opponent's absence. It was then that the boy suddenly appeared, shouting and clearly anxious. He apologized for taking so long. The referee, visibly annoyed, asked him why he had taken so long to arrive. He said he would listen to the explanation later, but that there would be no time for him to rest. That would be his penalty for being late. The referee ordered the competitors to take their positions. Adella wanted to know why her rival took so long to arrive. Agent told her it was nothing serious. He had just been making some preparations for the battle. Adella seemed intrigued by that answer. Acknowledging the strength of his opponent, our protagonist confirmed that extra preparation was necessary to defeat her, but that didn't convince the girl, who didn't believe he could have prepared so much in just one day. Still, she could feel that the rival before her was no longer the same as the day before. He had changed. Maybe now, at last, she could witness the true power he possessed. Ayul said he had some good advice for her. She should go all out from the beginning if she wanted to have any chance of winning. She seemed to take his advice, forming a sphere of energy in her hands. Pointing her fingers at him, she began preparing to fire a blast of flames. The fire materialized on her fingertips, like the barrel of a gun. Using other magic circles, she managed to multiply the spell. About to be hit by those fireballs, our protagonist prepared a wind barrier that kept him safe from the attack. Using earth magic, Adella then managed to materialize a large spike. Right after, several cracks started appearing on the arena floor. They advanced toward the protagonist, and he was about to be hit by an explosion that erupted from the ground. To avoid being hit, he had to jump into the air. Adella saw this as a great opportunity, since he wouldn't be able to dodge while in midair. She had to take full advantage of that opening, and was already fully prepared to strike him with another attack. Ayul is fully aware of his current situation. His defenses are compromised. At least, that's what most people would think. But our protagonist isn't like most people. He managed to conjure a barrier beneath his feet, creating a solid platform. Many of the spectators were impressed by his use of such a high-level technique. Even the protagonist's rival was shocked, as he had turned a magical barrier into a platform, revealing his impressive genius. He's still the same, with an aptitude for magic and a strategy that few possess. To overcome the secret moon techniques, our protagonist must use everything he has, and if necessary, he will bring the sun itself into this battle. A brilliant light began to shine, so intense that it even blinded the blonde girl's eyes. As she tried to get a better look at the source of the light, she began to wonder if it could be sunlight. Our protagonist was positioned right in front of her, and the girl knew an attack was coming. To defend herself, she summoned a large magical shield, and our protagonist was now ready to deliver a decisive blow to his rival. Wind magic had formed a large sword in his hands, which he used to forcefully strike the shield summoned by the blonde girl. Our protagonist kept pressing his attack. He was using first circle spells, while his rival was using third circle ones. The attack failed to destroy the barrier, and Adella began to think that the boy was being too cautious. He was now back on the arena floor, opening up a new opportunity for Adella to launch an effective attack. But as soon as she tried to move, she noticed one of her feet refused to budge. She hadn't realized that her foot had been completely immobilized while she was defending herself. Noticing that it was a form of earth manipulation, she tried to figure out when her opponent had managed to do it. Perhaps he had done it the moment he landed back on the arena floor. If that was the case, he was truly incredibly fast. The blonde girl's eyes could barely keep up with what was happening, and while she was distracted by her thoughts, Our protagonist had managed to approach one of her flanks, now completely ready to maintain his offensive. This time, he would use water magic to attack the girl, who quickly destroyed the spell that kept her foot trapped to the arena floor. But our protagonist had bought enough time to summon several spheres of water, launching them all toward the girl. Once again, Adella relied on her magic, a barrier to stay in the fight. She was being heavily outmatched by her rival, and even during the combat, she was impressed by her opponent's ability to handle so many elements. She started to remember Kim's words about our protagonist, who used a fourth circle spell, memorization. That made her believe he could only use first circle spells. Full of confidence, she was sure she wouldn't lose to such weak magic. But while she was lost in thought, something moved quickly through the air, landing right beside the girl and making a loud noise. It startled her, as she hadn't seen any gaps in her defense. She assumed he had hidden one of his wind techniques, a modified spell, using the excessive glare of the sun to achieve it. Honestly, I didn't understand that attack. It barely landed near the blonde, and she acts as if she's been defeated. For goodness sake, Adella fell to the ground looking up at her victorious opponent. Ayul stared at her, asking her if she had forgotten who she was fighting. Clenching her fists in fury, Adella seemed completely unable to accept the outcome of the battle. That secretary was impressed by the boy's combat instincts, and so was her superior. It had all started when he dodged the girl's earth needle. Everything had been planned. He had intentionally leaped into the air, baiting Adella to keep attacking, using the sunlight to blind his opponent. Through memorization, he delayed the release of one of his wind lances. After hitting the ground, he kept drawing the girl's attention so she wouldn't look up again. He even immobilized her foot so she would completely forget what could come from the sky. When the right moment came, the final wind lance struck its target. A dramatic conclusion, but we also know he is mistaken. Still, he praised the boy's efforts, a great first circle mage, although the protagonist's father remained pensive, because even with those victories, his son was still in the first circle. They looked back at the arena. It seemed the fight wasn't over yet. The two young people were still on their feet, exchanging an intense gaze. The protagonist's father was irritated. His son, despite having the advantage, hadn't finished the fight, so he concluded that the boy must be completely incapable of winning. At least that was what he believed, because Adella still hadn't used her greatest trump card. Placing a hand on her chest, she said she was impressed. It reminded her of the old days, and now she would also fight her rival with all the strength she had. And that was exactly what our protagonist had been eagerly waiting for. The blonde's entire body began to glow intensely. That was the supreme attribute of the moon, the secret magic of the House of Mystics, the halo. Once she started to execute her secret, a technique, several magic circles began to appear in the sky. The resulting energy was so powerful that began to push the protagonist's body back, forcing him to resist just to stay in place. The energy was so immense that it filled the entire sky above the arena, leaving the audience deeply impressed. Inside the room reserved for important figures, the protagonist's father began to break out in a cold sweat. He stood up and walked towards the exit. Kim asked him if he was really leaving. The old man said that the battle was already decided. There was no need to keep watching, but just as he finished those words, both of them were stunned by what unfolded in the fight. Even the secretary considered it completely impossible. While Kim couldn't hide a mix of astonishment and joy at what he was witnessing, the protagonist's friend was also in complete shock. But no one was more surprised than Adella herself, because our protagonist had done something truly intriguing. That magic circle on his back was the flaming volcano. He had just shown them a second circle spell. He told the girl he had already warned her. He was late for the match because he needed to prepare to defeat her. She still believed that memorization was limited to first circle spells, and if he did that, it was possible he had already reached the fifth magic circle. But since that idea was completely unrealistic, our protagonist remained silent. No one knew the truth yet. The night before, the students were heading to their dorms. Inside his room, Ayul was deeply focused on studying the mysterious book. He knew he couldn't defeat that girl using only first circle spells, and his combat style isn't very compatible with the secrets of magic. His original plan was to wait until he matured, and only then defeat her. But in the newly written pages of that book, he realized he could handle Sime. He received instructions to channel his magical power into the circle on the next page. The book said that this would lead him to a new domain. Intrigued by this guidance, he began to think that it might be some kind of mechanism. As there was no reason to doubt, he decided to give it a shot, channeling his magical energy into that magic circle. Immediately, the book began to glow, leaving the boy deeply impressed, until the glow became so intense that his eyes hurt. The energy being released was overwhelming. He could no longer look directly at the pages, until finally everything stopped, leaving only the glowing pages of the book. When he could finally open his eyes, he realized that many things had changed. He was now in a different environment, full of shelves and books, like a library. Not recognizing the place, Ayul began to wonder where he could be. A woman answered that question, welcoming him to the first page of the first challenge. The peculiar-looking girl was named Alpha, and she was the guide assigned to that page. These details were still very confusing for our protagonist. She confirmed that this was the first challenge inside the Book of Hydrat, but that information only confused the boy more as he realized he was inside the book. He hadn't been teleported to a distant place, was inside the mysterious book. If that was true, it was incredible. In that challenge, they would check if the protagonist himself was already completely refined. He would receive instructions shortly after starting. If he managed to get through pages 18 to 31, he would obtain information about the second circle. Ayul understood that he needed to overcome this to reach the next levels. Since the explanation had already been given, Alpha asked if they could begin. Filled with determination, Ayul was eager to be tested, and now everything was going just as he wanted. The first challenge would begin immediately. A soft golden light started to envelop the girl's entire body while our protagonist watched her, still very surprised. He couldn't tell what she was exactly. She seemed human, but he couldn't rule out the possibility that she was a magical entity. A voice said it would explain how the challenge worked. Ayul immediately recognized that voice. It was his master's. A gem made of light appeared. It was called the elemental mana light. It was still incomplete, but it contained 4 mixed, irregular attributes. With the stone floating in his hands, Ayul remained visibly stunned. His task was to completely purify that artifact. Faced with that challenge, he briefly began to doubt his abilities, because that type of artifact is very delicate. It requires manipulating mana with extreme caution. Inside it, the 4 types of mana existed in a chaotic state, and now he was entrusted with purifying it. It was like separating grains of sand, salt, and sugar after they had been completely mixed. It was not a simple task. Only those who had mastered the heart's intent could purify it. Still, refusing to give in to insecurity, Ayul realized that it would be a very interesting challenge. He immediately began to use the heart's intent to overcome it. Little by little, the mana that was completely mixed began to separate. This task demanded every last ounce of concentration that the boy could muster. His entire focus was on overcoming it, and he continued to separate the tiny particles of mana inside the artifact. His task was almost complete, but the difficulty kept increasing until he was repelled by the artifact, crashing into the room's bookshelves. If the mana wavered, even slightly, it produced a shockwave. He had to be even more careful. The mana was so tangled that separating it was not at all easy. After the first failed attempt, Ayul came to an interesting conclusion and now believed he could do it. He would try as many times as necessary and time began to pass quickly. He kept trying. If he lost concentration, even a little, he had to start the whole process over again until he finally managed to purify the artifact. His master congratulated him for completing the first challenge, once again calling the boy, his successor, for mastering the heart's intent. The book would now be updated with instructions on the second circle. After those words, the protagonist's eyes suddenly opened. He was looking at the ceiling of his room. He finally realized that he had returned to the real world. His book had also gone through some updates. Heading straight to the source of knowledge, Ayul was eager to learn even more about the second circle. He knew the next match was approaching, and before it happened, Ayul was confident that he would be able to completely master the second circle until it was finally time for the match. Very determined, Adella was using her family's secret technique, unleashing a truly terrifying power. She believed that would be more than enough to secure her victory. Our protagonist had been enveloped by a huge pillar of light. His friend was watching the match and started to worry, as it was possible that the attack had ended the duel. Even Adella believed it, turning her back on her opponent while saying that the duel was over. But in her thoughts, she acknowledged that her rival had grown much stronger in a short time. She began to remember the rivalry between them, believing that the genius she once knew no longer existed. However, she was soon taken by surprise as a strange sound echoed in the arena. She turned around in amazement, trying to understand what was happening. That was the second circle. Our protagonist was activating the resonance. With blue flames in one hand and red in the other, he was still in the fight and would now show everyone that there was still great potential in his career. Joining both hands, he fused 2 infinite circles with free will. They would now become his hands and feet. Both Kim and the protagonist's father watched, completely astonished. They had no words to describe what they were seeing. Even the people in the audience were amazed, and the blonde girl was paralyzed, unable to understand any of it. Our protagonist was executing his techniques and, in addition to the magic circle, on his back, 2 extra pairs of hands had appeared. Now he was about to unleash the flaming volcano. Adella tried to react quickly to create a magic barrier. However, our protagonist had materialized a huge magic machine gun. It was then that the blonde girl realized she really should have gone to the bathroom before the duel started, because she was fully aware that she couldn't block that attack. Still, she remained determined to do what she could to keep fighting. For the first time in the entire story, her expression changed. Adella was genuinely happy because her rival had returned. Unfortunately, our protagonist didn't see her smile. He pulled the trigger without mercy. Even the referee was impressed by all that power. In an instant, everything he had summoned disappeared inside the arena. The protagonist's father and Kim were still speechless. The poor blonde girl could no longer stand because she had been completely defeated by our protagonist. Even though he had won, Ayul almost collapsed from complete exhaustion. Only then did the referee declare that the match had ended, naming Ayul as the victor. His father started to leave the room again, and the secretary asked him if he was really leaving. The old man said he had other matters to attend to. With a sly smile on her face, Chin seemed to have understood everything, because that man was definitely not good at one thing: hiding lies. As soon as our protagonist left the arena, he ran into several people, but none of them were his focus at that moment. His body was completely exhausted. The second circle of resonance synchronizes with the heart's intent of the first circle to amplify the magic. And the lunar magic is a hybrid technique. It combines the range of light magic with the power of darkness. This happens through small adjustments made with the dark element, altering its intensity. That way he could reduce the attack's range and countered the halo with enhanced dark magic. Since lunar magic is a secret technique restricted to members of the House of the Moon, not everyone can use it. But by briefly observing the technique, he understood its structure, achieving delicate mana manipulation. This was only possible thanks to the circle of resonance. Purifying that artifact refined his mana control, which was crucial for his victory. While he was sitting and thinking, he noticed students gathering elsewhere. A man with glasses was approaching him. He finally had the chance to speak with the protagonist, which left the boy completely surprised, because in front of him was the master of the magic tower, and the man said he had come to speak directly with Ayun. The two went to another location to speak more privately. He apologized for bothering the boy, who must have been very tired. But he had seen the duel, saying it had been an excellent battle. Ayun thanked him for the compliment. Now the man was going to ask him a direct question based on things he had observed. He wanted to know if the boy had reached the 5th circle. Intimidated by the question, he remained silent for a few moments and, in fact, he had used second circle magic. And that man must have been thinking that he used the technique of memorization. That's why he was probably assuming that our protagonist had reached the 5th circle due to the limitations of memorization. A little embarrassed, he tried to explain, saying that he had not yet reached the 5th circle, but the man's curiosity was immense. He wanted to know how the boy managed to use that last spell. Ayun thought that the man wouldn't believe him if he found out that he used vision magic. Remembering something that he had heard from the boy before, he thought he was referring to transformation magic, something that had already been mentioned on a previous occasion. Ayun confirmed that assumption, but he didn't actually want to reveal what had really happened, so he went with that version of the story. If he had really reached the 5th circle at the age of 18, it would cause a huge stir in the world. Quinn praised the boy's skill, although he still didn't understand how it related to second circle magic. The man asked many questions, but his doubts remained unanswered. Ayun told him that he had perfected the memorization spell. Those words left Quinn deeply impressed. He could no longer hide his excitement, seeing that this was truly a way of doing things, realizing that it was a remarkable strategy. His posture remained serious as he brought his hand toward our protagonist, only to congratulate him, because the boy had overcome a known weakness of the memorization spell. However, our protagonist was no fool. He noticed the color of the man's eyes had changed. They were red now. It was as if they were analyzing him completely. The eyes remained fixed on the boy, who began to feel extremely uncomfortable because the man still hadn't removed his hand from the protagonist's shoulder until he finally seemed to calm down because he had confirmed that there were no traces of mana in the boy's body corresponding to the 5th circle. Just as the boy's father had said, he hadn't reached it yet. In short, he said he understood everything and would give an explanation to the reporters, but his eyes remained intrigued. With unanswered questions, the boy got up from the armchair and gave his thanks, wishing the man a safe trip back home. Upon leaving the room, he gave a respectful bow, but that brief interaction had left the boy very nervous. He hadn't expected the master of the magic tower to inspect him with the red jade eyes. It is said that the master of the blue tower possesses those eyes. They can penetrate the very essence of mana, making them the most powerful ocular detection technique. Our protagonist believes he managed to get away without being discovered, since the Blue Tower Master didn't do anything. His sandbagging techniques are his greatest asset, and he can't reveal them recklessly. More battles were fought during the exam, and our protagonist continued to rack up victories. None of his opponents had been as challenging as the blonde girl. As he walked through the halls, someone asked him to wait a moment. Turning around to see who it was, he realized it was Adella. He thought she was still unconscious, but the girl was already on her feet saying she was fine. Ajun asked her to skip the pleasantries. Adella said that if it wasn't a bother, she would like to get some advice on combat, but since the final round hadn't taken place yet, she said they could do it later so he wouldn't get too tired. But that wasn't a problem for him. He said they could do it now, that it would also help him grow, and asked the blonde to follow him to the waiting room. She acknowledged that she still had a lot to learn regarding strategy and the use of magic, and that one day she would also reach that level, because she wanted to be like our protagonist. As the boy walked, he could feel the warmth of her gaze. In the middle of the city, there was a tall, mirrored building. It looked like the headquarters of some important place. Inside that building was a large residence, and seeing our protagonist giving interviews, a girl thought all of this was already over. The crest on top of the building was the symbol of the Sin family, and the girl didn't seem happy with what she saw on the news. That completely changed her plans, as she believed everything had already been settled. She asked if her brother was going to leave Ayul alone. She is the eldest daughter of the Sin family, but since her name is too complicated, she will be called Violet from now on. Sinjen is the man's name, and he asked what they should do under these circumstances. The girl doesn't want the protagonist to be accepted back into the family, saying that her brother also knows how things were a year ago. She doesn't want to go through that kind of treatment again, but her brother told her not to worry. 1 year ago, the protagonist was still a great prodigy, but now he's nothing more than trash capable of using second circle spells. And he asked if Violet hadn't also seen the matches. What really worries him is the notoriety he's gaining among the people, with everyone saying the protagonist is amazing. Jian told her to pay close attention to what he was about to say. The opponents the protagonist has faced so far were only third circle mages. He probably won't be able to defeat someone from the fourth circle. Besides, he has a catastrophic flaw, as he can't use AI, and almost certainly won't be able to remain promising. No matter what he's done, he is far inferior to a fourth circle mage, and the same goes for his abilities. Violet seemed calmer seeing things that way, imagining that our protagonist would continue crawling on the ground. Still, she couldn't get rid of all her insecurities, saying that he might become a threat to the next head of the family. In that case, Jian said they could take care of him. There was still time for that. The day was almost over and the twilight bathed the arena. The ground of the place was heavily damaged, and a boy had fallen to the ground completely exhausted. That was enough for the referee, who declared the end of the match. And the champion among the second-year students was Ayul, who began to receive applause from the audience. Many started saying that the Prodigy had finally returned, and that it was to be expected that someone from his family would do something like that. Even without using AI, he had managed to be victorious, further increasing his fame as a genius. His friend was still cheering in the crowd, saying that our protagonist was truly amazing. Approaching him, he said that everyone couldn't stop talking about the boy's skills. He was being recognized by everyone, but there were also those who could only feel envy, saying that the protagonist was nothing without using forbidden magic. His teacher was also very proud of the result he achieved. Ayul's friend asked if the teacher was going to take the students to celebrate, and that was exactly what he had in mind. Knowing there would be celebrations, they got even more excited, until our protagonist said he would really like to go too, but that he had a very important engagement. That immediately ruined his best friend's enthusiasm. He said it wouldn't be a party without the guest of honor, but Ayul insisted it was important as he rushed to leave, apologizing once more for it. In the city, he knew he had to keep that promise until he finally found what he was looking for. Next to a limousine, a man said they had been waiting for him, the youngest son of the Sin family. The head of the family was already waiting for him, and the boy would be taken to the main residence. Night fell, and they finally reached the protagonist's destination. For a brief moment he stood in front of that huge gate. It had been 1 year since the last time he was there, because he had rebelled against his father after being declared incompatible with AI and was forbidden from ever entering that place again. And due to his recent achievements, he had entered there once more. Looking at the inside of that room, he realized that nothing had changed. Everything was just as he remembered it. He took a few more steps into the enormous foyer and came face to face with a large pair of doors. On the other side of that room was his father's office. Finally, after all his effort, He had returned to this place. Once in front of the door, he knocked gently to announce his arrival. And, sure enough, the head of the family was already waiting for the protagonist's arrival. The old man looked intently towards the door and granted the visitor permission to enter until our protagonist finally opened the door. Once inside the office, the boy showed his respect and said it had been a while since he was last there with his father. The old man told him to sit down while they talked. He said that he used to consider the boy a failure. For goodness sake, what a pathetic father, because it took him 20 times longer to cast a spell and they would disappear if he lost concentration, unable to do more than one thing at a time. He said his son was the perfect example of how useless a person could be. This guy definitely wins the Father of the Year award. For goodness sake. Still, everyone recognized our protagonist's exceptional talent, so he suggested the boy use guidance to develop the full extent of his potential. He didn't have high expectations for it. He would see it as a desperate move. After that free session of humiliation, our protagonist said he understood everything. The old man believed that after that newspaper article, his son would come to his senses after being defeated. But things turned out differently. His expectations were completely shattered, because the boy had mastered magical transformation and had won that bet between them. The protagonist's combat performance was worthy of a true mage. The boy's eyes began to sparkle upon hearing those words. He sincerely thanked his father, as he is a huge attention seeker. And the old man confirmed that, from that moment on, the family would give him all the support he needed to grow. The boy just had to say everything necessary to continue developing. He could even live there again. As the next successor of the entire family, he had to do a good job. Our protagonist smiled widely because, in addition to attention, it would be very convenient to get a good inheritance. But the old man still had one last warning to give. If he suspected the boy was stagnating or regressing in his progress, he would personally destroy his magic circles. Frankly, this man tries very hard to be a bad father. It would have been better if he had simply been absent. Our protagonist felt intimidated by the pressure of an 8th circle mage. This was his last chance. He accepted his father's absurd condition. Sitting back in his chair, the old man asked what the boy's goal was. He said that at one point he did wish to become the head of the family, but he was far behind his other siblings who were already dedicated to that mission. Our protagonist said that was still his greatest goal, nothing less than that. He will make everyone in the family acknowledge him. The old man wanted to know how he planned to carry out that plan, so he showed something on the table saying that he would participate in it. The competition. World academic competition that would take place in 2 months. He said he would return home with the gold medal. This competition is exclusively for students under 20 years old. It happens every year and is known as the Magic Olympics. The level of competition is high, comparable to professional leagues. The old man said that the country's record was a silver medal won by the leader of the Blue Tower, something that happened several years ago. He then said that the boy's goal sounded completely delusional. My goodness, this man is a master of healthy motivation. But our protagonist was unfazed. He said he had one condition for his father. He asked that for the next 2 months his father prevent his siblings from interfering with him, because it would hinder his training. The old man not only doubted that the boy could win a gold medal, he now realized that the boy was asking for immediate protection. He would normally reject such a request, but he admitted that it might actually be a good idea. Dawn finally broke, and several books were scattered across the bedroom floor. Our protagonist had fallen asleep right there. He couldn't even walk 5 feet to sleep in a comfortable bed. Slowly opening his eyes, he realized he had fallen asleep without even noticing. As soon as he returned from his family's home, he began researching the requirements for the second test. Although he had passed the first challenge, he needed to master the 3rd circle. And to do that, he had to complete the second test. Unfortunately, he's completely lost. The only clue he has is resonance. Maybe he has to raise his level until it becomes consonance. The total refinement of the 2nd circle. At least that's what he will try, as he is working to understand the principles of consonance. The clues given in the book said that he needed the circle of judgment and the circle of resonance to connect in an organic way. Our protagonist began to try to put that into practice. The circles were connected, but imperfectly. This is the crossroads he finds himself at. Since his mind was too preoccupied with that, he decided to go for a walk to clear his thoughts. He decided to head to the city center. Breathing in the fresh air and seeing the buildings around, he immediately felt relieved. He now believes he is much more capable of achieving total resonance. While he was lost in thought, someone told him to be careful. Looking to the side, an object was approaching his face dangerously fast, but his reflexes didn't react in time, and he was hit by the object. A girl approached, asking if he was okay, and our protagonist complained that it hurt a little. Looking ahead, he seemed to recognize that figure, because it was now Adella standing in front of him. The two started walking together, and he asked her why that plastic bag had flown into his face. She said she had been swinging the bag cheerfully because she was going to drink banana milk, but she ended up losing her grip and it flew into the boy's face. Finally, understanding what had happened, he saw the girl start to apologize. Despite that, he was grateful, since he was also going to drinking banana milk, and asked him if he still only drank that, revealing a bag full of it. The girl said that it was the perfect drink. She also said she had heard some rumors that the boy had returned to his family's home. He confirmed it, telling her he had returned to the magic tower the day before. The blonde girl said that was a great relief, and asked if he still dreamed of becoming the head of the magic tower. A little confused, our protagonist asked if he had ever said something like that. She recalled the conversations they had when they were kids, saying they talked a lot about that topic. But our protagonist no longer dreams of such things. Adella was very surprised by those words, wanting to know if he had accepted responsibilities tied to the reality of his family. Since he has many siblings, becoming the head wouldn't be an easy task, and Ayul found it strange that she thought about it so seriously. He said his current dream is to become the master of magic, to become the pinnacle of the art above all other magic towers. That is his new goal, which left the girl very impressed, as that's something almost beyond imagination, given how difficult it is. And being someone who sees him as a rival, things have just become even more challenging. In the main house of the protagonist's family, people are very anxious. Violet can't stop biting her nails while she thinks about all the things that could happen. She slammed her hands on the table to talk to her brother. She asked him if he wasn't worried about what had happened, and the boy said the old man must have had his own reasons, but he was also pensive because he found it hard to believe those conditions. The night before, they had been summoned by the head of the family for a talk. Knowing he is an exemplary father, he already knows the personalities of the two degenerates, and had an order for both of them. For the next 2 months, they were not to interfere in the protagonist's life in any way. Violet was immediately outraged, but her brother asked him to continue speaking. He wanted to know what had motivated their father to do something like that. The best father in the galaxy said that they should already know the youngest son had returned to the family. He is still developing and is 1 year behind the others. He stated that it would take 2 months for him to adapt to this exemplary family, and he knows that these two shining examples of morality and human decency before him might cause trouble. For a brief moment, the boy was silent, showing how angry he was, until he accepted his father's request, wanting to know if there was anything else. The old man said they must be tired and told them to disappear, because a good son is a distant son. Violet wanted to know why they left that place without questioning the orders of the head of the family, but she quickly got scared by what she was feeling, because her brother couldn't hide the rage he was feeling. Accepting that order was very difficult. Minhyuk and Mingji are the other siblings who seem to be more rational and aren't interested in this competition, so they weren't summoned. But he cannot accept the privilege the youngest son received. If it were the traditional old man he knew, he would never have granted such a favor. Like that. Every son should fend for himself, that's the old man's motto. So she can't understand why the old man, the best father in the galaxy, suddenly started acting like a father for the first time in his life. Violet is theorizing a few things, wondering if the old man already knows everything. Her brother said that's not it, because the youngest son still hasn't shown enough to be the successor. Still, it's possible he has shown some interesting potential, or maybe the old man is just interested in the mysterious magic the youngest son is capable of using, or maybe he made a deal. Violet worries, imagining what kind of deal they could have made, and that could be true, because the old man doesn't act like that and his face looked desperate. She's already thinking of ordering her lackeys not to follow the younger brother, but the treacherous brother said that could be a problem, as their father has followers who operate from the shadows, the intelligence unit that serves the head of the family directly. If he finds anything out, it will be a problem. The treacherous one has already withdrawn all surveillance on their brother to avoid trouble. Violet wants to know what he plans to do now. Then he said he was going to take action. He can't allow his brother to get that advantage. He needs to consult with the Black Tower immediately. Another school day begins at the Obelisk Academy. The professor says the evaluations are over and congratulates her students, announcing that first place belongs to that class. She asked our protagonist to stand up so he could be applauded. Among all the 17-year-olds in the country, he was the best of all. Now that he's in first place, he could hold that position for 2 more months and compete in the academic Olympiads, and that's exactly what our protagonist plans to do. The jealous ones rush to say he's too ambitious, because in 2 months he will definitely lose the reputation he worked so hard to gain. Even hearing those words, the boy isn't shaken. He has the mental fortitude of someone who grew up with the best father in the galaxy, which is why he remains confident. His friend stretches outside, relieved that class is finally over. He hates going through theory lessons, and our protagonist says, there will be practical training tomorrow. which is why they should keep exercising, since his friend's body is still too weak. Even upon hearing that comment, he accepts the statement. Unfortunately, he can no longer joke about the protagonist being weak, and Ayul said he should also work hard to get stronger, something the boy is willing to do just to be able to hit his friend. With all that determination, he suggested they go to the training room after dinner, but his friend wasn't too thrilled with the idea, and our protagonist asked what that confused expression was. He said he's out of shape right now, so he'll have to take a rain check. Ayul told him he could have just said no, he didn't have to make up an excuse. His friend said that he doesn't like training with the protagonist, which offended him a little, until the boy revealed that he finds his training a bit scary. Even the others' expressions are bewildered. Our protagonist is doing squats with a ridiculous amount of weight. He must have some dirty little secret, maybe, a hidden syringe or something like that. Even with all that weight, our protagonist does several reps, leaving everyone impressed. Some recognize him as the one who got first place in the evaluations. After finishing his exercise, he carefully placed the weights on the floor. He had been so focused on improving his magic that he ended up neglecting his physical training, saying he was out of practice. After hydrating a bit, he began to think about the notes from the book. The infinity circle is related to the body, and it interacts with physical training. When both are strong, they become more efficient. That's why he also needs to commit to physical training. But lifting all that weight, he must have a dirty little secret. Maybe he's making love to protein shakes. Inside that building is a three-eyed beast that looks like a panther. Those Digimons are part of the protagonist's training. The creatures launch themselves at him, showing sharp claws and dangerous fangs, but the boy dodges the first attacks with great ease. Everything is completely clear to his well-trained eyes, taking the opportunity to strike some of the digitized creatures. As they are hit, they begin to vanish. The protagonist's movements are so well crafted that he manages to confuse the creatures, creating opportunities to annihilate each one of them with his flames. With his final attack, he struck two more, leaving only one Digimon to be incinerated. His training was finally complete. The instructor would now give the boy his results. His performance was absolutely impeccable. Upon hearing this, our protagonist was delighted. While sitting on a bench, he began to think about his situation. Thanks to the infinity circle, his physical abilities had increased by approximately 1.5 times. Once he reaches the third circle, he will become even stronger. That's why he needs to refine the infinity circle. Closing his eyes, he began to concentrate. He needed his full attention. He was trying to perfect the circles he had already mastered, making the mana flow through his body, making precise adjustments to the rotation of each circle, gradually increasing the purity of the mana circulating between them. He was close to synchronizing both, but the boy is not yet able to do it, and it's an extremely exhausting task. He had reached 99%, getting stuck at the final stage before the synchronization could be completed. Despite his many failed attempts, he wasn't discouraged at all. After all, if being the son of the best father in the galaxy didn't break him, nothing else would. Still, as part of his training, he started running outside. Our protagonist was listening to his favorite songs to make the exercise easier until he started to approach a corner. Just as he was about to turn, he saw a hooded man on the other side. The man tried to hit him in the face with an attack, but our protagonist's reflexes were incredibly sharp, and he managed to dodge it. He immediately asked who the person trying to hit him was. There was no need for words. He quickly recognized the man's identity. It was Saiuk, the one who had just tried to attack him. The man tried to strike again, but his blow didn't reach the protagonist. Taking the mask off his face, he said the boy was really good, dodging like a rat, picking up one of his earpieces that had fallen to the ground. Our protagonist asked why he hadn't gone home, saying he didn't return because he couldn't, taunting the boy with that truth. Since he was under evaluation, he wasn't allowed to leave the academy, and B was getting even more irritated. Our protagonist said that after B used his family's influence, all he managed to do was ruin himself even more, saying the bastard had nowhere left to go. Summoning fire magic, he had already lost emotional control and said he was going to finish off the protagonist, who now realized how serious the situation was. That degenerate was about to attack him in the middle of the street using magic. B furiously charged forward, determined to destroy the promising future of a spoiled rich kid. His attacks were too slow for the protagonist, who dodged and grabbed him by the shirt. B realized that his attack had been completely intercepted, and it wasn't long before he was thrown to the ground like a child. Our protagonist stared him down from above. While listening to the desperate screams of that pathetic creature, he ended up taking advantage of it as a great opportunity. The boy was subdued, but he was still threatening our protagonist's life. He told the man in the suit that he had to suppress him, since he had been attacked with magic, and everything had been recorded by the security cameras. Our protagonist said he couldn't believe the audacity of that insolent being, and the man told him to go rest, that everything would be resolved at the academy. Meanwhile, the bastard was being pushed into a car. Watching him, Ayul hoped the bastard would stay just like that. Finally, morning came at the Obelisk Academy. Several students were reading a bulletin that had been posted that same day. Saiuk, sanctioned for using offensive magic in the middle of the street. Still, he only lost 10 points, when in reality he should have been expelled. Our protagonist already expected such an outcome, since the bastard's family is very rich and makes large donations to the academy. Perhaps he is being punished now, but all that the boy received was a phone call from someone clearly furious about his actions. The bastard started to apologize to his father, who had already warned him to keep a low profile until he graduated, and began to ask him if that was really such a difficult task to accomplish. His graduation is necessary for them to receive a noble title, so the boy has to cooperate. Ending the call, he said he would keep it in mind. But the truth is that the boy is still very stressed about the situation. He hated being hated by the protagonist, who defeated him in a humiliating way. He can no longer contain the hatred he feels in his chest. Little by little, that feeling is turning into a very strange obsession, as the spoiled brat believes everything is the protagonist's fault. While crushing his phone under his feet, he keeps repeating to himself that it's Ayul's fault. One of the professors approached the boy, noticing that he holds a strong grudge against the protagonist. The spoiled kid wanted to know what the instructor was doing there, saying that he decides for himself who he likes or dislikes. The instructor acknowledged that everyone has the right to make that decision in life. Getting even closer to the spoiled brat, he asked if he didn't want to get revenge on the protagonist. His first reaction was one of great surprise, but the old man wanted to know. Wasn't that exactly what he was wishing for? Meanwhile, our protagonist continued to be a diligent student, focusing on his studies. He was considering questioning the academy's stance on the incident he went through, but he ended up gaining something in return. At that very moment, he had just received an email. It was from his father. The negotiation with the Back family was over. For the incident, they obtained 3% of the mining rights that the Back family owns over a mine. The head of the family wanted to know if our protagonist wanted to receive some kind of reward for that. In order to receive a noble title, the B family also needs to maintain good relations with others, and the concession they made was the right one. After all, they messed with the most important person in this story, the protagonist. This only emphasizes how important the noble title is to that family. The title separates the families. Saiuk ended up being expelled from his for the actions he took. Thinking that everything was resolved, our protagonist decided he would refine his techniques a bit more. The next day, life goes on normally at the academy. Ayul thinks that the instructor's control over the students has become more strict due to the incident, and one of the instructors came to speak with him directly. This is the same one who favors the spoiled kid. So he approached our protagonist in a friendly manner, while watching him with treacherous eyes, without the boy suspecting a thing. He said he had noticed it seemed Ayul didn't like him. Our protagonist was surprised, and almost admitted that he really didn't. The instructor said it was understandable, as he had been hard on him several times, but that his words were sincere advice, and asked him not to misunderstand. That was so strange that Ayul began to wonder what could be happening that he didn't know about yet. The instructor extended his hand, asking to start over. Still a little embarrassed, he was about to thank him, but before touching his hand, he felt something terrible. An uncomfortable sensation ran through his entire body. All this while the instructor was still congratulating our protagonist on his performance in the competition. Ayul noticed that the mana seemed completely calm, but something was very wrong. Now he could see what surrounded that instructor. A sinister aura. Without knowing exactly what it could be, he thought it might be dark power. The Black Tower is a well-known place in this world. Unlike the other towers, it is not official and follows a different path. It is composed of criminals who serve the Dark Mage. Our protagonist never imagined that this instructor could be affiliated with them in some way. It's possible that there are other mages infiltrated within the academy as well, but that is not his priority. Now, he first needs to understand the formula of that magic to be better prepared. Finding himself in this situation, he immediately used his ability to analyze the phenomenon. That magic felt somewhat familiar to him. He realized it was a mind control spell, but our protagonist already knows that his brain is completely immune to external interference. So, this mind control spell certainly won't work on his mind. Thanks to his innate ability, he'll be able to survive this challenge. The people around him still haven't noticed anything, which made him think about his next move. He's going to pretend to be affected by the spell to extract all possible information about the Black Tower. Our protagonist opened his eyes with an apathetic look. The instructor believed his technique had worked perfectly, saying that the boy was a cripple who was of no use anymore, but he would still make an excellent pawn. Leaning towards the boy's ear, he told him to listen carefully to these instructions. He was to carry that object from now on, without questioning the reason behind it. Pretending to be under his control, he said he would do as he was told. But the instructor had one more question. He wanted to understand how the boy's unique magic worked, pretending to feel a sharp pain in his head. The boy said he couldn't answer that. The instructor interpreted that reaction as a subconscious desire to keep things hidden. He told him not to try to answer, prompting the boy to act normally again. Mind control magic has a very specific function. It interferes with the target's emotions to effectively control them. It's a technique used by the Black Tower. When it's used by an advanced caster, it can destroy the target's mind, making it a dangerous and forbidden spell. Extracting memories from a mind with great willpower can be fatal. Since the instructor gave up on the question, our protagonist realized his objective must be something else. Still, the man revealed that he was annoyed. He wanted to take advantage of that inside information, but he couldn't let his mission fail. He said that once it was done, he would eliminate that boy's vision magic, and, after saying that, he placed his fingers. Our protagonist pretended to have regained consciousness, and the instructor started talking to him. He asked if everything was all right, since the boy had seemed strange during their conversation, saying it might be due to exhaustion. He quickly parted ways with the instructor, who advised the boy to get some rest. It wasn't long before the instructor disappeared into the crowd, but our protagonist was more determined than ever to get to the truth. He continued on his way while his classmates headed to the cafeteria. Ayul sat down on one of the benches in the academy's garden to examine what he had received. He very carefully observed the small chip. It was one that was illegally distributed. Someone must be trying to frame him as an illegal user. Their goal was to destroy the boy's public reputation. But that instructor doesn't have a real motive to ruin him, even if their relationship isn't the best. So someone must have made a request to the Black Tower. Even with this information, he still can't fully analyze the situation. Perhaps it was that kid's doing. Spoiled, but he's already so ruined that it's probably not him. It could be that one of his brothers is behind it, trying to eliminate him from the race for succession. Mage isn't part of that race, so he lacks any real motivation. And Nu wants to be the head of the family, but he's never seemed like the type to do something like this. That leaves the two degenerates, who might be working together to sabotage the protagonist, the boy thought, immediately about capturing the instructor and interrogating him gently, but that would attract the attention of the Black Tower, which definitely wouldn't be good for his current situation. Faced with all the possibilities, he needs to keep thinking about how to protect himself. To get some more answers, he went to the Blue Tower of Earth Magic, heading to the office of the person who runs it. He was received immediately upon arrival. Kim wanted to know what had brought such a talented young man to his office, and his gaze showed both interest and caution in their interaction. Ayun noticed that Master Q seemed much colder than usual. Still, this was his chance to ask for help. Kim told the boy not to act like he was a burden in front of him, and our protagonist knew he had to seize this opportunity and, apparently, just as the rumors say, he must be deeply involved in some research, which was probably why he was acting that way. That was precisely the question. Our boy asked him, and Kim replied that he was studying a stone, whether it was magical or common, and he was taking up more of his time than he had planned. Upon looking at the artifact, our protagonist recognized it instantly. It was a rare opportunity, and he had to make the most of it. Once they sat on the sofa, Kim asked him to get straight to the point, as he was busy, without hiding his own curiosity about what had led the courting boy to discuss something in person. Seeing that he was getting a bit frantic, our protagonist began to worry that he might ignore everything he was about to say and, before getting to the main topic, he told him he had something to tell him about the artifact he was researching, that peculiar stone, the elemental crystal. Kim was immediately surprised to hear that from the boy's mouth, and now wanted to know how he knew, since its name hadn't been revealed to anyone. From that moment on, the boy had to speak very carefully. Kim was furious, thinking the information might have been leaked, and the boy said that he hadn't done such a thing. Opening his backpack, he said there was a very simple reason why he knew what it was, because he also had an artifact just like that one, which left Kim even more impressed, because the version the boy had was already perfectly purified. Kim couldn't dodge the question. He wanted to know if the boy had been the one who purified it. Our protagonist confirmed that he had purified the artifact himself. The leader of the Blue Tower, upon hearing that, felt very uneasy. As talented as the boy was, that should have been impossible. The best artisans in that world, even the master of the Blue Tower himself, couldn't produce such an artifact. And now, a mere student was standing before him, claiming that he had made it himself. Kim wanted more information, so he asked if the boy had brought the artifact with him. Ayul said he brought it because he knew that only a magic tower would have something similar. Kim was very interested in knowing how the boy had obtained such an artifact, but our protagonist didn't give the full answer. He said it was pure chance and luck. The man approached him in a much friendlier manner, saying the boy must be blessed with extraordinary luck because he recognizes that mages must have their own secrets. That's part of who they are. So he wouldn't press the boy for additional information, but he was very interested in examining that artifact a little more closely, which our protagonist allowed. Looking at it more carefully, he said it was the only one of its kind that simultaneously possessed the 4 elements. Returning the object to the boy, he asked him what the purpose of bringing it was. Our protagonist said he hoped he could use that object to craft another artifact. Intrigued by the request, he wanted to know what kind he was talking about. It could be clothing or accessories, maybe even a weapon. For Ayul, it could be anything that would increase the efficiency of elemental magic. Kim understood the request and began to ponder it. To create something like that, he would need materials of the highest quality. The cost would be very high, so he asked if the boy could afford it, until he remembered that the boy came from a wealthy family and that they would probably cover all the expenses. But our protagonist said that would be unacceptable. He wants the project to be kept completely secret from his family and from anyone else in this land. Kim wanted to know how the boy planned to pay that amount and if he could afford it without his family's support. Ayul said he had something else in mind, an alternative method of payment. He would craft a stone like that right in front of the Tower Master. Kim asked if the boy was serious about teaching him the method to create that rare object, because if that was the proposal, it was very interesting. He might even add something extra given how big that payment would be, which led Ayul to ask if he could also request something else. Now, much friendlier, Kim was willing to hear what kind of request it was. With a small object in his hand, he brought it closer to the Magic Tower Master, who immediately recognized the chip as illegal, asking right away how the boy had obtained it. He hesitated for a moment. He said that a mage from the Black Tower, an infiltrator at the academy, had given it to him. Faced with these infiltrators, he went to the Blue Tower to ask him for help. The full moon shines in the night sky. Our protagonist had been given a ride back home. He told the driver to get back safely. Without a goodbye, the secretary told him they would see each other again very soon. As she drove away, the boy watched her disappear over the horizon. After a very intense day, he finally managed to lie down on his bed to rest. His luck that day had been exceptional. He hadn't imagined that Kim was investigating that object. Thanks to that, he could continue to keep the secret from his father, to craft this new artifact. The plan had been to obtain the B family's mining rights, but now he would have to wait a little longer. His eyes are extremely tired and sleep is about to claim him. In the Blue Tower, Chim remains deep in thought, because he knows that the security at Obelisk Academy is very efficient. Even so, dark mages managed to infiltrate the place. The only evidence he received for that accusation was the chip and the word of a single student. Although it was a serious accusation, there wasn't enough evidence to validate the hypothesis. Normally, he wouldn't act based on the suspicion of a single student, but things are different with the protagonist, and he decided to take the risk. While talking on the phone, someone asked him if he had arrived safely. He confirmed that he had and said that they should proceed with the plan. Our protagonist patiently continues on his way. They told him not to worry about anything. As long as the information is accurate, the Magic Tower doesn't make mistakes. Inside the elevator, Ayul said he was placing his trust in them and would be in touch soon. The young man is now in another room, and announced his arrival to those waiting for him. Seated at the table are all his siblings who grew up in that wonderful home full of warmth and understanding, with no trace of rivalry. Mingji reacted very cordially, saying it had been a long time. He agreed with her words, saying that his sister hadn't changed at all. She took it as a compliment, saying her little brother had grown a lot and would soon be taller than Inuk. That brother was also very kind, telling her not to say such ominous things about his height. He welcomed the protagonist, acknowledging that it was difficult to feel completely happy, but welcoming him anyway. The boy thanked him, thinking to himself that his older brother, still got straight to the point. As always, Mingji quickly reprimanded that behavior, but the boy had no idea what he could have done wrong. There were only 2 left to speak, those with hearts full of love, Jian and Violetta, who often conspire against the protagonist. Jian said that he was looking less and less like a child and more like a man was appearing. Violetta also told him it had been a long time since they had last seen each other while they smiled on the outside. He was sure his siblings were conspiring against him, which made him think that the culprit must be in that room. The eldest told him to sit down and start eating, saying he was curious to know what had motivated the youngest to gather them all, because he was sure it was nothing special. Our protagonist said he just wanted to see everyone one more time, which is why he organized this meeting. Violetta was surprised by how trivial the meeting was, but Ayul was already prepared, saying that if he hadn't organized it, His older siblings would have done it anyway, which only made Violetta become even more bitter and furious. Giving in completely to her anger, she demanded that the brat reveal what he was really planning. He played dumb, and Violetta told him to stop acting like an idiot because she knew he wanted to be the heir. Ayul warned that even if he said right then and there that he wasn't interested, no one would believe him. Once again, Violetta became irritated, deeply, and the protagonist said there was no point in saying those things, since no one would believe him, which made his sister very emotional. As she got even more distraught, Jian asked him to calm down a bit. Words don't prove much in matters like that, not as much as actions do. He said he was interested in his brother's transformation magic, and asked him if he would like to share it with the family. Our protagonist immediately saw the greed in his older brother. Sharing that would be the same as giving up the race for succession, something he is not willing to do now. Charming as ever, he said that secret was his only hope, as he can't become a mage through AI modernization. This is his last chance to achieve his dreams. He said it wasn't about the race for succession, which deeply moved his well-mannered sister, while Jian was left speechless. The other two also seemed a bit lost upon hearing those words. Mingji seemed very affectionate, even wiping the tears from her younger brother's face, while the clueless brother said they should forget about the competition for a moment and just relax a bit. Mingji agreed with the suggestion, since she wanted to hear more about Ayul's life. It wasn't long before desserts arrived at the table. Apparently, everyone was chatting in a relaxed manner, sitting at the same table as time went by. The clock marked the passing of the hours. Our protagonist realized that some time had passed and that he needed to start acting. His phone began to vibrate. Shocking news was spreading. Everyone took out their phones to read it. Mingji had no idea what could be happening, while the clueless brother said it was something really urgent. Even Violet seemed concerned, as she didn't expect something like this at that moment, and the fury on Jian's face was very evident, because he clearly didn't like what he had read. The message said that one of the instructors from the academy was affiliated with the Black Tower and had been arrested immediately. After reading the news, everyone went back to acting normally. But our protagonist believed he had finally found the culprit behind everything that had happened, because his older brother's expression showed discomfort. Watching him more carefully, he began to wonder if his brother was the mastermind behind the whole plan. Later that same day, his brother spoke on the phone with someone, saying that our protagonist had been right all along. With the phone in his hand, he was reading more details about the criminal instructor's arrest. After everything that had happened, Qin had even more questions for the boy. Qin wanted to know how he had deduced that the instructor would tamper with the academy's training materials. He said that he had made a simple logical deduction based on the information he had gathered. The instructor would surely act inside the academy, since he had infiltrated it. Considering the mind control and the schedule for that week, he could only act on one day, Friday, the day of the survival exam. He would surely try something during the assessment, and to do so, tampering with the materials would be the first step. His actions would have to happen before the inspection, the materials. That left only one possible day for it to happen, the day before the exam. On Thursday, the Blue Tower was already monitoring the room where the materials were stored, and at the same time, the protagonist gathered all his brothers to find out who had orchestrated that plan. As a result of all his actions, the instructor had been arrested. Furthermore, the boy began to suspect that his older brother might be involved. Ayul executed the plan to perfection, gathering information without compromising himself. His actions were flawless. His only regret was not having been able to link his brother to the instructor's actions. Kim said he wanted to help the boy this time, but he ended up being helped by him, as the Blue Tower's reputation had increased significantly. He said that he wouldn't forget to return this favor, something a boy in his current position couldn't refuse. Kim appreciated his sincerity and ended the call, saying he would take care of the remaining matters, while our protagonist asked him to remain cautious. Just as the call ended, a massive explosion occurred on the avenue where the protagonist was. The shockwave sent him flying as he tried to get up. He still couldn't say for sure what had just happened. In the midst of the smoke, there was someone who kept repeating his name. It was the spoiled brat who had said goodbye to his sanity and now wanted to end the protagonist's life. Seeing the spoiled brat completely out of control, our protagonist started to sweat nervously. It wasn't long before the boy began to attack with everything he had. He had nothing left to lose. Ayul realized that the attack was too fast. He needed to react immediately. The first strategy he used was to expand his resonance to its maximum. That was enough for him to conjure a water shield, which would be effective in blocking the fireballs. But it didn't take him long to realize that the attacks were too powerful. It was only a matter of time before his defense collapsed. Now his focus was on restoring the shield he had created, buying time to react. He managed to strengthen it enough to ensure the attack wouldn't be fatal. Still, when the two spells collided, a huge explosion erupted. Our protagonist's body was sent flying, finally crashing into a nearby lamppost. Looking at his hands, he saw that they were burned. He hadn't been able to completely dodge the attack. On the other hand, the spoiled brat was overly confident in his superiority and now intended to finish off his enemy. He said that the protagonist was no more than a defective piece of trash, and that he would get what he deserved while crawling on the ground. This whole incident was still extremely worrying for Ayul. As he watched his enemy, he noticed that there was something strange about the boy's body. His gaze was unrecognizable, his eyes as red as blood. There was also a very visible redness on his skin. It was clearly flushed. These are clear symptoms of an adverse reaction. He had definitely taken a drug that induces a loss of control. It forcibly accelerates the mana flow, causing blood vessels to rupture, making the user look covered in blood and crazy. Most importantly, he'll fight to the death. He asked him if he was really crazy, but with a look only a madman could have, he answered that he was perfectly fine. Quickly analyzing his opponent, he noticed that he was in the third circle, burning his mana non-stop. Finally, the spoiled brat managed to get his hands on our protagonist. He tried to break free while calling him crazy, but the brat insisted once again that he was perfectly normal, more normal than ever in his life. Because now he was going to end his enemy's life using a point-blank fire spell, Flame Infection. After the attack, thick smoke and soot began to rise into the air. The spoiled brat looked at the ground, observing the protagonist's fallen body. He was surprised that his victim was still alive, but that only infuriated him more, as our protagonist had managed to block his magic twice. He couldn't accept that a defective piece of trash was capable of that, and began to demand to know how he could have so much skill, until he started screaming as if he were completely out of control. After that outburst, his behavior changed completely. He said that this kind of thing just happens. Ayul knew that this type of sudden mood swing is typical of someone using that uncontrollable enhancement drug. Still, many things still didn't add up in this situation. The first is the excessive power that the spoiled brat was able to use when attacking. No matter how much of the drug he had taken, his power shouldn't have increased so drastically. He wondered if he should examine the situation more carefully. And upon noticing he was being watched, the brat asked what he was looking at. Without giving an answer, our protagonist summoned a large dome of wind, launching several attacks in the spoiled brat's direction, who became enraged again, saying that the magic was as useless as its user. Our protagonist reflected that he should have been more careful when using his wind magic. Still, he hadn't expected such a good opportunity to attack. He was already close to the brat with a Rasengan in his hands. It happened so fast that his opponent couldn't react. The protagonist's attack was already in motion. The poor spoiled brat could only be shocked. There was little he could do at that distance. Our protagonist believed it had been a clean hit. There was no way he could have dodged it. However, the spoiled brat was using fire magic at close range, which could have a disastrous result for the development of the fight, and the maniac screamed with glee, wishing for his enemy to just die already. That magic was called Fire Shotgun, very powerful at close range, but its range was short, only 23 feet. He could dodge it by running. And the spoiled brat managed to fire several of those blasts. With great skill, our protagonist dodged every single one of them. He wondered if the brat hated him enough to use a defective chip, but he didn't think the item was defective. It had made him much more powerful. Ayul said this was to be expected. The brat didn't even remember what had happened. Intrigued by those words, the brat said that he would never use a defective item to face trash like him, and that if he should stop talking nonsense and just hurry up and die, unleashing more attacks towards Ayul. But those wind spears missed their target. Ayul said that the chip enhanced physical strength and altered the range and power of magic. The spoiled brat didn't think much of it. Ayul continued his explanation. He was studying the structure of circles, mana, and the transformation of magic formulas, and he was very sensitive to those kinds of changes thanks to the training he had been doing. In this fight, he was understanding the function of the chip even better. His opponent was still furious. He didn't care about his words and just wanted to see him dead. Our protagonist said that that wasn't a thank you. He was just deciding whether to finish him off now or later. In the last few days, the protagonist had been deep in thought while studying Hidret's book. The biggest problem was the penalty, since accelerating while switching between different types of circles put enormous pressure on both the body and the mind. The resulting penalty was in the duration. For those who reached the second circle and mastered the use of resonance, the maximum duration was 3 minutes. After that, the circle wouldn't move for the next 12 hours, so he had to think carefully. The brat, upon hearing this, thought that he was scared. The maximum resonance time he could use was only 3 minutes, but to win this fight it was more than enough. Placing his hands on the ground, he began to use earth magic. Large cracks started to form on the ground, heading straight for the brat. He tried to react to avoid it, but suddenly he was hit in the leg by a stake. He quickly recognized that it was the third circle and began to wonder how a piece of trash could do all that. Our protagonist was intrigued by his question and started to think if he should explain how he had achieved it. As the brat attacked, Ayul said that he had always thought so. His enemy was as bad at magic as he was at taunting. When a fireball headed towards him, he once again used a water shield to defend himself, but this time the result was completely different from the beginning of the duel. The brat still hadn't realized and, thinking the protagonist still couldn't block his attack, he believed that this time he would burn him to the bone, but it didn't take long for him to understand what was happening. His previously powerful attack had become completely useless against that defense. Ayul said the boy should at least understand a few things before opening his mouth, that the magic he had just cast was completely different from before, and that his techniques wouldn't be able to touch him from that moment on. With all his attacks thwarted, the brat became enraged again. He started charging at the protagonist to launch close-range attacks. When he got closer, he said he finally understood what was happening. Ayul could have only gotten stronger because he's doping. He's definitely using something to have that kind of strength. Closing his eyes in contemplation, our protagonist said that it was all over, and he wouldn't regret what happened because it was all the result of that idiot's own actions. As soon as he finished speaking, he used dark magic. While he was completely engulfed by the shadows, the idiot began to wonder, what could that be? Ayul said that things might have been different if the idiot had hesitated to try and kill him, but that's not what happened. In the middle of the darkness, unable to see anything, the idiot started to scream furiously, saying that Ayul was a coward for hiding from him. The protagonist wasn't finished with his attack yet. He was also using earth and wind magic. He managed to summon chains that completely immobilized the unhinged young man's body. His legs were also firmly bound to the ground. It was too late to beg for mercy, but Ayul assured him that he would try to send him to the metaphysical world as quickly as possible. The idiot refused to believe those words, thinking he could still break free, blaming the protagonist for his miserable life. However, Ayul said that he wasn't the one to blame for that. It's very easy for weak people to blame others for their own actions. Then he asked the idiot why people don't use illegal chips, aside from the collateral damage they cause to the body. After reaching his hand toward the chip, the idiot's body began to writhe in deep, intense pain. He simply channeled a bit of his mana into the chip's frequency and asked the idiot if that pain wasn't unbearable. The boy's agony was so intense that he could no longer control himself and began to beg the protagonist to stop. A body and mind already pushed beyond their limits can collapse with the slightest external interference. At last, our protagonist was able to thank the idiot. Thanks to the foolish actions he took, now Ayul would receive great benefits from that fool's family in a way he couldn't even imagine. Who knows? Maybe even 40% of the rights to the magic stone mining they own. Now it was time to say goodbye. He said this while thanking the idiot for the nice gifts he had received. Once again, he placed his hand on the boy's chip, this time channeling much more mana, causing a total collapse. The fight between them had finally come to an end, and the spoiled brat now fell to the ground, completely motionless. Our protagonist crouched down to pick up a phone. After dialing a few numbers, he made a call. He had called the best dad in the galaxy, who immediately asked why his son wanted to talk to him so late in the day. Ayul said that he already knew his father had been watching everything and that it was quite strange that no student or police had shown up after all that commotion. The best dad in the world tried to deflect, saying that surely the students had been evacuated and that his son shouldn't assume things just because he has the power to block the police's actions. Ayul said that many people can do that, but few would stay and watch until the end. If it had been his brothers, they probably would have attacked him from behind. But thanks to the non-intervention agreement, they didn't know anything. The best dad in the world agreed with those words. While still on the phone, Ayul noticed someone approaching. A man in boots was very close to him, kneeling before the protagonist. He said that he had apprehended Sion. Some hooded men came to pick him up, body, as Ayul walked away. The best dad in the world asked why, if his son knew he was being watched. He didn't ask for help. He didn't because he wanted to show off third circle magic. His father didn't believe he had achieved that in such a short time and thought his son was hiding the truth. He said that he did achieve it, but it was a lie. In reality, he had only used the resonance effect of the second circle, so he admitted that he still lacked power, and that if his father knew he could use third circle magic, he wouldn't have gotten him to stop his brothers from acting. Besides, Jan was using sound-blocking magic and illusion magic to mask the surroundings. The best dad on the planet said that wasn't half bad, and that he was sending a car to pick up the protagonist so he could go home and rest. Their call ended with a note that they would see each other soon. The old man looked at the phone with a subtle smile on his face, until he started laughing out loud because he was impressed by the confidence his son had gained. Looking at the bodyguard, Ayul said it had been a long time since he'd seen Jan. The man placed his hand on the mask he was wearing, revealing his true identity. He confirmed that it had indeed been a long time and asked for a moment. Approaching the young master, he said that the wounds he had were not superficial. He would only perform first aid and leave the rest to the family's personal doctor. Ayul thanked him for his care. As he walked to the car, he said he would leave the rest of the work to that bodyguard. He had already put his mask back on, saying that the news about this wouldn't spread. Inside one of the family's buildings, someone was feeling very uncomfortable. It was the eldest son who was very upset. He had no idea why things were happening this way. A man sitting on the sofa asked if he had finally finished working. He thought he would be waiting there forever, so the eldest son asked if he was from the Black Tower. The mysterious man remarked that the subject had been unlucky. He didn't expect that someone from the Blue Tower would ruin their plans. That only made Jian even more irritated, as he had been promised that the Black Tower never fails. And now he wanted to know why the man was still waiting in his house. The hooded man apologized, saying he laughs too easily and that he would return the payment since the mission had failed and he would take care of the consequences. Since the client was very important, he shouldn't worry about any leaks, because the instructor who had been captured wouldn't live to see the next morning. The eldest son said he didn't care about that. He wanted to know what would happen to the spoiled brat who gave the chip to Ayul. The hooded man told him not to worry because the brat was no longer alive. He had suffered brain death. Shocked by the news, Jian demanded more explanations. The brat attacked Ayul completely on his own, and due to the chip's side effects, he was now nothing more than a breathing body. Jian didn't care what had happened to the brat. He wanted to know how his brother was. The hooded man said he was a little hurt, but had already left. Jian didn't like the way he said it, and the hooded man insisted he was just telling him what happened. Being seen, Jian was furious upon realizing that his brother had defeated the brat, even when he was using a powerful chip. The Dark Mage confirmed that was exactly what had happened, although some details weren't clear. At first, he didn't know what the brat's purpose was when he approached Ayul, but he knew that Yan was also there and was responsible for completely sealing the area. That's why the Dark Mage couldn't observe the entire fight. Jian wondered if the shadows had helped his brother and asked the Dark Mage if he knew how long Ayul had been followed. But the man confirmed that he had only seen Yan after he were separated from Ayul, and that he had no more details after that. The eldest son knew that Yan was the head of the family's shadow unit, which served his father directly. Intrigued by his presence in that place, he thought that he should act with much more caution. He asked what the Dark Mage would do with the defective chip that Ayul now possessed, and the Dark Mage confirmed that he shouldn't worry about that either. That chip had an erase code and was probably already destroyed. Since the boy seemed to have many questions, the Dark Mage asked him if he still wanted to know anything else. He said no. Then he confirmed he would be leaving, as he needed to burn some living files. Jumping out the window, he bid farewell to his client, leaving Jian alone and furious. He needed to avoid Yan, erasing any evidence he might have left behind. He had to hurry before things became irreversible. After that fateful day, a few days passed. Our protagonist continued to drink from the pyre, mysterious fountain of knowledge. He spent so much time studying that he needed to stretch his body frequently. He heard from the master of the Blue Tower that the instructor, who was also a criminal, died during his transfer. That news left him slightly pensive. He had expected it, but he didn't imagine it would happen so suddenly. Since nothing else had happened since that day, it seemed that Yan had handled the situation with the brat's family very well. While he was thinking about that, the protagonist's phone started to ring. He learned that they had secured 43% of the mining rights, and his father was very grateful for his contribution. The boy never expected to receive a thank you from the best dad in the galaxy, who must have been truly grateful. Looking out his room's window, he felt glad that everything had turned out well. He only had one thing left to do now: prepare for the Academy Olympiads, which would be held in 53 days. He would put all his focus and effort into that. Looking at his phone, Ayul never imagined that the best dad in the galaxy would send all that information at once. Seeing the details about the Olympiads, he was glad that things were going very well, because that's what he would focus on now. While he was distracted, a magic circle began to appear on his body, a sign that the 12-hour penalty from the resonance had ended. Clenching his fists, he could feel his power returning. Now he needed to concentrate completely on reaching the third circle. To do that, he would immerse himself in that book of mysterious teachings. He was now ready to go to the page of the second trial. Once again he was absorbed by the pages of that book. For a moment, his eyes were blinded. It was a bit difficult to see in that place. The space was completely white, and the boy even thought it might be another world, until he felt a presence materializing behind him. The woman congratulated him for reaching the second trial, although she looked identical to the first one. Her name was Beta, and she was the one who managed that space. Still reflecting on her words, the boy began to wonder if their trials would be similar, since in the first trial he had to refine that crystal completely. Beta said that the second trial would evaluate the successor on whether he could also manipulate the circle freely. As soon as the trial began, he would receive more instructions, and upon passing, he would receive the contents of pages 32 to 81. Faced with the amount of knowledge he would obtain, he was truly impressed. He never imagined he would have access to almost 50 pages of pure knowledge. Maybe he could even learn how to become a moneylender. That could only mean that the third circle was on a completely different level from anything he had tried so far. Beta announced that the trial would begin immediately and soon disappeared before the boy's eyes. The master's voice began to speak to his disciple. He was going to share the contents of the second challenge. Magic circles would appear one by one in front of him, and the boy would have to activate them all. He didn't take long to extend one of his hands, following the instructions he had received, channeling the mana he could control, toward the circle. Once it was completely harmonized, the circle would activate naturally. Upon seeing what his mana had caused, the boy was a little surprised. The activation time for each circle was 3 seconds. If he exceeded that time limit, he would have to start over from scratch. Ayul thought that all he had to do was memorize. Only then did his master confirm that the order of the circles would change and that tricks like memorization wouldn't work. It was as if Ayul was already expecting something like that. This wouldn't be easy. But if life were easy, babies wouldn't be born crying. So, the boy began to concentrate because he was quite determined to move forward with this attempt. Time continued to pass normally on the outside. Our protagonist looked at the cover of the mysterious book. He was completely exhausted after that first attempt. After 8 hours without any rest, the only thing he had managed was to harmonize 10 circles. The good news was that he was gradually understanding how to execute it, but he still needed to find some tips. So, he decided to keep reading that book until he finally came across an interesting note. That wasn't the only book written by that author. If he had questions, he should look for his other works. Those words left our protagonist impressed. He was sure that he would eventually need to find those other books, but he didn't know their names, much less what they were about. He decided he would go out into the city for a walk, get some fresh air, and a change of scenery is always good for his thoughts. And once again he ran into the same person, right after leaving his dorm to take a walk. It was natural that Adella was buying banana milk. The future couple was sitting on a park bench, chatting amicably. They acknowledged that they had been seeing a lot of each other lately. Ayul said the girl looked like she had pulled an all-nighter. Annoyed by that comment, she replied that the feeling was mutual. She said she had been reading a very interesting article and asked the boy if he would like to take a look. The title was The Viability of Spatial Transfer Magic. Our protagonist thought that title was a bit sensationalist. Although he agreed, Adella was completely impressed and was eager to read it again. Once she opened the book, the boy began to read its introduction. He was deeply focused, while his classmate was chugging banana milk. Due to her peculiar tastes, she carried a bag full of that kind of drink. After finishing his reading, he told her that the content was very good. Although they both agreed that the book didn't have a proper conclusion, there was also some information in there that caught Ayul's attention. The article was based on books left behind by Rel Bittner, which had been analyzed by the author. That name instantly made the boy anxious. He needed to know more about it. He already suspected it might be the case, as the book's structure was a bit different, but much of its content resembled Bittner's basic theory, so he asked his classmate who the author of that book was, and she said his name was Gosen Hun. As soon as he returned to his room, the boy went to his computer to investigate. He discovered that the author of that article was an unaffiliated magic researcher with no organization, of unknown gender and age. The only article he had ever published was that one. Perhaps he disappeared after receiving criticism. Our protagonist started to feel frustrated, imagining that this might be the limit a student like him could reach. But he was no ordinary person. He was very well connected. With the phone in his hand, he immediately called the master of the Blue Magic Tower. Inside the tower's headquarters, the master picked up his phone. He was extremely tired, as he had spent the previous night conducting his research. He heard from Ayul that the young man had something that could benefit them all. Knowing that the young man always brought good opportunities, Kim was immediately on alert, until our protagonist asked if he could help him find a certain person. Life inside the Obelisk Academy continued as usual. Our protagonist had headed to the training room. He was using his magic techniques to improve them in combat. His friend, poor guy, was the sparring partner this time. A tough and painful task. Several of our protagonist's attacks were directed at the boy, but that was way beyond his capabilities, and he said our protagonist was cheating. He replied that it wasn't true, it was just a first circle spell and shouldn't be a problem at all. But his friend was outraged by that comment, saying it was still extremely unfair. After attempting a few dodges, he realized that they weren't very effective, as his face was soon hit by one of those windbirds, watching everything. Our protagonist got very excited because his friend managed to protect himself at the last moment. That made him very happy, but his friend said that he had almost died just a few moments ago. Since they had already practiced magic, he invited our protagonist to train in unarmed combat. Ayul thought it was a great idea, but he questioned his friend's ability to beat him in that type of fight. The young man was already approaching, motivated and ready to throw punches at our protagonist's face, but he was taken by surprise when his shirt was quickly grabbed. He couldn't even react and had already received a one-way ticket straight to the ground. It was so brutal that other students who were also practicing started to get worried. Showing off the strength in his hands, our protagonist asked his friend what he thought of that, because for him, training that way was also very interesting. In unarmed combat, there was no advantage from variable magic. Only the power of the second or third circle remained. But the protagonist's friend didn't know if that was an insult or a compliment. He said that Ayul's skills were insane and that his combat prowess was truly outstanding. Still, he considered him a pretty dirty fighter. While applying bandages to his friend's back, he told him that if he was complaining, maybe he should try biting his own back. They were already getting ready to leave the training room, and the young man asked our protagonist what his next plans were, since he knew his goal was to win the Olympiads. Ayul was very surprised by that, not knowing how he had gotten access to such information. Proudly, he said that his friend couldn't hide anything from him. That's why Ayul was so motivated. During the crystal mana barrier test, an average student could block 27 attacks, but our protagonist managed to block 74. Besides the exams and training, the boy had been excelling at absolutely everything. If he planned on competing with older students, that was the best option he had available. But in the protagonist's current condition, it will be a challenge to win the Olympiads. Seeing the expression on Ayul's face, his friend was sure that he had hit the nail on the head. The favorite for this year is a magic user who is already in the 5th circle. Ayul realized that San-chan was right about everything. He can use 3rd circle magic with resonance, but to enter the Olympiads he needs to be in the 4th circle, which is why he needs to find Go-san-jun. Inside the city, he began to analyze the location he had received on his phone. He started to wonder if that was really the right place. Kim apologized for the delay. He didn't think it would take him one whole week to find someone. Still, he managed to find San-jun's address. The boy realized it was the old bookstore he used to visit. He never imagined that this author was so close within his reach. Since he couldn't use magic, he had always depended on books. Maybe he had even found the mysterious book in that very place. Upon opening the bookstore's door, our boy announced his arrival. Inside, a man was organizing some things. He quickly recognized his customer, Ayul, saying it had been a while since the last time, and asked if everything was okay. He had even heard that the boy could now use magic properly. He also noticed that he looked much healthier. Ayul said it was all thanks to him. The old man replied that he had not done much. He had only sold some old books, but Ayul said it was those books that allowed him to progress so much. The old man felt flattered by the compliment and asked what brought him there that day. Getting straight to the point, he asked if San-jun was his son. That only made the old man more intrigued, as he wanted to know how the young man had learned about that person. Our protagonist said that he had read his article and had many questions to ask. Once he found out he was nearby, he apologized if he seemed intrusive, but since it was very important to him, he wanted to meet that person. The old man remembered that article and said he would help the boy meet him. Ayul immediately showed his gratitude by bowing to him, but the old man warned him that even if they met, there was no guarantee the young man would get any answers. After hearing that, Ayul asked what he meant by that. Then the old man opened a door and asked him to follow him, saying that San-jun was inside. After walking a bit more, they arrived at another door. The old man told our protagonist to go in. That was San-jun's room. Knowing that he was about to meet this person made our protagonist feel very anxious. The protagonist's shock was quickly explained. What he saw before him was a man bedridden with life support and intravenous lines in his arm. It looked like he had been in that condition for a long time. His eyes were sunken, and his hair was very long, and there was no sign of him ever waking up. That man before him was the bookseller's son. The two sat there by the bed while our protagonist was deep in thought, until he finally gathered the courage to ask what had happened to him, and the bookseller said he would answer. His son had broken a great taboo in the world of magic. That was what happened to him. Ayul immediately asked what it was. The old man replied that the boy had tried to circulate mana within his own brain. This sparked many thoughts in our protagonist because that was something he had also done. It was the first step that allowed him to become a disciple of that mysterious book. But seeing the condition of the man in front of him made him feel deep empathy, and he asked why he would do such a thing. The old man's understanding of his son seemed immense. He said that it had been necessary. Finally, a decent father figure in this story. In his quest to establish a flawless thesis, he ran into some problems along the way, and his last resort was to try circulating mana in his brain. The old man reflected that he should have stopped him no matter the cost. That way, he would not have a son trapped in that bed. Our protagonist started to wonder how far that man had gotten with his techniques, and the bookseller apologized, as he could no longer satisfy his customers' questions. But he acknowledged that his son would have been very happy to meet him. Ayul was the one who apologized for making him go through that, as he had revived feelings the old man did not need to remember. Putting a hand on his shoulder, he told him it was all right, because he knew that this young man, besides being diligent, he had a deep appreciation for books. My goodness, what a wise and understanding father. Forget everything else. This is the real hero. He remembered the way our protagonist carefully reviewed each of the works, and that reminded him of his own son, which made him very happy. As they talked, the light of the twilight began to stain the sky. Before leaving, he asked if he could have access to the books that the son of the old man had used for his research. Since they would just be left to rot on the bookshelf, he agreed that it would be better for the books to find someone interested. Honestly, I'm already looking forward to this family having a happy ending. However, he had two requests to make of our protagonist. If one day he wrote articles on that subject, he asked that his son also be cited. Ayun assured him that he would definitely not forget. Now came the second request. He asked that, under no circumstances, that promising young man before him try to circulate mana in his own brain. Our poor protagonist said he wouldn't do that. Having made his requests, he took the boy to where his son's research books were kept. He allowed him to look for any books he needed. It wasn't long before one of them caught our protagonist's attention, and the book seemed to know it would be used, launching itself from the bookshelf, falling to the floor in front of our protagonist. Upon quickly examining the cover, he noticed it looked a lot like Hidret's book. As soon as he picked it up, Ayun had a question for the bookseller, and he immediately recognized that copy, as his son used to carry it with him frequently. He asked the boy to read it too, since the answer to his curiosity was surely to be found in those pages. As soon as he opened it, he immediately recognized the terrible handwriting. It definitely belonged to his master. He asked the bookseller if he could borrow that book. The old man told him he could take it and any other book he found necessary. Ayun was deeply grateful for all the kindness shown to him. He took the opportunity to ask if there were other books written in a similar way, but the old man didn't know. He asked if there were books with similar covers to that one, but the old man didn't remember any. Ayun began to wonder how his son had gotten that copy. Then, he thanked the bookseller for the help he had received. Now he was curious to find out how Hidret's book had come into his possession. The boy finally managed to return to his dormitory. Even after analyzing the books used by Sanjun in his research, he only found one that resembled the book he already possessed. Although it was small, this modest result was better than nothing. Once the books were placed together, they began to react synergistically. The boy was very surprised, trying to understand what was happening, as the books started to glow at the same time, until several roses began to emerge from those pages, and the master's voice appeared once more, saying that he was leaving that book for his successor, and our protagonist realized he was being absorbed by those pages. Once again, her name, a copy, was Mimiri, and now he had to enjoy the blessings of knowledge until his heart was satisfied. And the boy was dragged into that other dimension. His body was transported to a room and he was lying on the floor. Getting up slowly, he wondered where he could be. Someone was approaching from behind our protagonist and gently touched the nape of his neck. He turned around to see who was touching his cheek. It was a young woman who welcomed him to the book of Mimi Miri. Looking at that unknown figure, our protagonist asked who she was. Smiling at the question, she said her name was Mimi. She was also the administrator of this place called the Will of Mimir. She said she was very grateful to meet the successor. He looked around trying to understand the place called the Will of Mimir, and the girl replied that was the name of that library. It had been prepared by Bittner himself to be used by the next successors. In fact, the entire library was exclusive to those people. Our protagonist thought that space was too small to be called a library, and the girl said that his achievements were still small, and that the scale of that place changed according to the successor's level. Judging by its current size, she guessed he hadn't passed the second trial yet, which our protagonist confirmed. Looking a bit uncomfortable, the girl asked if they could speak more casually. That question took our protagonist a bit by surprise, but she said they would be seeing each other frequently from now on, so it would be better if they treated each other more naturally. Ayul accepted that suggestion. which made the girl feel very grateful. She said that this successor is very talented, since he is already in the second circle and found her quickly, but he doesn't understand how that could be considered talent. The girl smiled briefly, saying that he could progress smoothly, without any setbacks, up to the fifth circle. That information stunned our protagonist, as he had no idea how that could be possible. Then, Mimir began to levitate in the air using some of her magic, until she reached a book that was on a shelf. The book floated immediately into her hands. Handing it to the boy, she asked him to read it. He would soon understand everything. Upon opening the book, he realized it was about resonance theory, but in great detail. This place contained information that didn't fit in Dre's codex, like the book he was reading now. The boy asked why that information wasn't all in a single book. Mimir said that was an excellent question. The trial pages and the successor verification had caused an overload. That's why the original book only contained the fundamental information, creating the need for supplementary material. Ayul asked if the master had also gathered detailed information in that book, and that was exactly what had happened. That place where they were was a vast reference library. Ayul assumed that all the books in that place contained dense information, and that the space would expand as he grew as a mage. Mimir confirmed that was exactly what would happen. Now she asked him if he knew how to get to the fifth circle. He said yes, with the material that he had received from her, he would easily pass the second test. When he opened those pages, it was as if he had been sucked into another dimension. As he took the test, his progress increased steadily. He had reached a total of 79 circles. On his first attempt, it had taken him 8 hours to synchronize 10 circles. But since finding that book, he had managed to increase his efficiency with little effort. Everything he was trying now was pure hard work, and he was very confident that he would soon manage to synchronize 100 circles, perhaps that very day or at dawn the next. Finding Mimir's book was undoubtedly a great blessing, especially right before the Olympics. The boy was inside his family's main residence. A servant was taking him to his father's office. He wondered what had prompted the summons and considered if it could be some kind of reward for the incident with the spoiled brat. After all, that event had brought great benefits to his family. He had planned to continue his private training. Although this meeting was important, he didn't expect it to be right at that moment. He finally entered the office. The best dad in the galaxy told him to sit down because he was going to get straight to the point. Unlike last time, his son's contribution had not been total. It barely accounted for half of the result, and his share of the mining rights was 26%. He acknowledged that the boy had brought great profits to the family, so he deserved a proper reward. He asked him if he wanted anything in particular. Ayul replied that there was definitely something he wanted. He wanted the ancient relic that was kept in the deepest part of the family vault. The old man asked if he believed in some kind of fantastic narrative about those relics, since they were nothing more than antiques. The boy said he didn't see it that way, he didn't care about sales, but he believed that even myths contained some kind of truth. His father put his hands on his head in worry upon seeing that his son believed in those kinds of stories, but since it was his choice, he would respect it, telling him that he could only choose one item. That got our protagonist quite excited. Now the old man wanted to know which relic he wanted. Ayul had a very specific item in mind. There was a cape that was properly stored away. It was Biner's own cape, preserved in that vault. The boy and his father went to the family vault where the relics were kept. The old man hoped he wouldn't regret this decision, and our boy was very grateful to receive that item. Seeing that his son believed in ancient stories, he realized that the boy was still quite naive. He should dedicate himself more to training, instead of trusting in those kinds of tales. The limousine sped through the streets to take the boy back to the academy dormitory. Most of the relics his family owned were completely authentic. Ayul wondered if that was really the cape that once belonged to his master. Having mining rights meant nothing compared to that item. If it was authentic, all that was left was to confirm if the item was genuine. As soon as he opened the container, his eyes were filled with absolute astonishment, given that those fibers are made with the purest mana. Mana fibers are the result of an advanced technique that transforms mana stones into a fine and refined fabric. There are less than 30 artisans on the planet capable of crafting items with this material, and this entire cloak was made from such fibers. Ayul began to wonder how this technology had existed for so many years. It is better than modern items, and he had never seen anything like it. The boy could no longer hide his overwhelming excitement inside his room. He continued to carefully examine the relic he had obtained. He found a signature on the cloak, written in terrible handwriting. Now he was sure it had once belonged to his master. Spreading the cloak with his hands, he began to analyze its structure. The inside and the outside were inverted. That was another reason why the material was so difficult to work with, because the inside and the outside had to be constructed in ways that were completely different. The inner part was supposed to conduct mana efficiently, and the outer part was supposed to focus on blocking mana and reducing damage. And this cloak was inverted. He was sure his master would not make such a huge mistake. He concluded that the cloak was meant to be worn inside out, and so he did with the relic, imagining it would look better that way. But even after turning it inside out, the structure remained completely unchanged. Ayul realized it had been designed exactly to be this way, but he still could not understand its purpose. Now he understood why his father had left that relic forgotten in the back of the warehouse. However, there was a place where he could get all the answers to his questions. The boy went straight to the Mimir's library. Upon arriving, he had several questions to ask her. The girl was surprised by the successor's presence. It did not take her long to notice the item he had brought this time, because she immediately recognized that cloak. Seeing that he had already found such an item, she thought the boy must be really lucky, but the successor had questions that needed answers. As the girl examined the cloak with her own hands, he asked what it was all about, until she seemed to have a sudden epiphany. She confirmed that the boy was still in the second magic circle. He was surprised by that observation, but confirmed that was indeed the case. Then it would be natural for him not to know yet anything. Still, Ayul wanted to know how he was supposed to use it. In response to his questions, she apologized, saying that she could not explain anything about that item to him. Our protagonist was very surprised, and she handed the cloak back to him. That style of magic had a very special enchantment, and the girl realized she had started to talk too much about the topic. Ayul asked what she meant, but she could not even say the name of the enchantment, so she asked him to forget the matter. Ignoring her own advice, she said that that style of magic contained an enchantment called true magic. Paying close attention to what she was saying, Ayul could not hide his surprise. She said it was different from the magic he normally used, which is why it was called true magic. Ayul asked if what he had been doing until now was not real magic. Mimir said that, unfortunately, that was a valid way of looking at it, but that she could not give him any more explanations until he reached a higher level. Ayul realized it must be some kind of restriction, and that was exactly what was happening. That cloak was an artifact meant to support true magic. Ayul understood that he would not get any more information about that artifact, and Mimir was relieved that he understood quickly. He just wanted to know what level he needed to reach to learn more about the cloak. The girl said he had to reach the 5th circle. A spark of excitement ignited the heart of our protagonist, as she told him he needed to master that level since the magic style of Bittner only began at the 5th circle. Once again, our protagonist was trying to pass the second test. This time he had already reached the mark of 98 circles and finally managed to complete the challenge that had been set for him. Knowing he had succeeded, he began to savor the taste of his own triumph. His master's voice congratulated him for what he had done. He acknowledged that it must have been very difficult to overcome the second challenge, but now he would teach him how to build the 3rd circle, the 3rd stage of Bittner's technique, the circle of infinity, and the interference technique. With that completed, he closed the book in his hands. Having overcome the second challenge at last, our protagonist looked like an excited child. He still didn't know how to use the cloak, and was already wearing it inside his room. I can't judge him. I would do the same. It's time for him to start building the interference circle. If it weren't for the cloak's blessings and the knowledge from the second book, it would have taken him much longer to complete that challenge. The previous night he had gone to Mimir for more guidance. He can only use that bank when he reaches the 5th magic circle. And apparently, the boy just needs to be patient until that happens. He decided he would wait to use the cloak until he could take full advantage of it, but the girl scolded him, telling him he shouldn't cast aside something so valuable, and our protagonist replied that he still didn't know how to use it. Then she took the cloak from the boy's hands and said that the artifact prevents mana from escaping and keeps it compressed inside, causing the user to reach a state of mana saturation. Upon hearing this information, he became more interested. When mana is saturated, the circles can form faster than usual, which increases the flow of mana in the brain. This allows him to recover from fatigue more quickly. The same applies to the physical fatigue accumulated in the body. He understood that by using the item, he would need to sleep much less, but the girl saw that he hadn't fully understood, because by using that cloak he would never need to sleep again. That effect was so amazing that the boy was immediately in disbelief at such a blessing, and she said he only needed to wear it for 5 hours a day to be in optimal physical condition, and that was just a small effect of the cloak, not even its true power. After seeing what the artifact was capable of, Ayul was increasingly eager to reach the 5th magic circle. She reminded him that it only works for the successor. For others, it is poisonous. The boy understood the message and was now excited for the upcoming trials, as the cloak would make things much easier. 2 days had passed since then, and he kept going, meditating with that cloak. His progress was accelerating more and more. He felt that interference was getting closer, but he was still missing something, so he immersed himself in the knowledge written in those books. The power of the 3rd circle allows one to interfere with another person's mana, but you must completely synchronize with it. That explanation was too vague, and it was surprising that someone could interfere with another's magic, because that honestly sounded very intriguing. At first, he didn't expect that, and had no idea that the second test was just a small step toward approaching interference. To weave the third circle, he needed to resonate and synchronize with the mana around him. If he could do it, the third circle would form. Filled with a new enthusiasm, the boy believed that this time he would finally get the result he wanted. He needed to synchronize the mana in the air, as well as the mana already saturated inside his body. It felt as if he were building a new house. The mana began to gather as he made it resonate. Little by little, the mana in the air was absorbed, and our protagonist could hear the voice of the mana saying that it was interested in playing with him and that it was really enjoying this. The sensation was so warm that it had no intention of leaving. All of this felt completely different, and our protagonist realized that he was already halfway there. He just needed to maintain the resonance. As the mana played, they began to hold hands to form a circle. Now he needed to concentrate even more, because if he lost focus, the mana wouldn't bind to his body. He had to reduce the amplification rate with great precision so that the circle could form, and he had to do it very carefully without the mana noticing what was happening. After several hours of meditation, a new day dawned. And even with the benefits of the cloak, the boy was completely exhausted, but his effort had been worth it, as he had completed his goal. He had the first circle of deliberation, the second circle of resonance. And now, clenching his fists tightly, he was ready to reveal what he had achieved. The third circle of infinity, interference. Our protagonist couldn't hide how happy he was with his latest achievement. He needs to get stronger as soon as possible to be able to reach the fifth magic circle. Inside the forest, near his academy, he went to rest in the shade of a tree while thinking that the next exam would be a battle that would take place in that mountainous region. The test will last 32 hours, and each student will have a special artifact. All he needs to do is survive as long as possible, and the area will shrink as time passes. He just earned a few more points, so it's also time to get moving. The students have to deal with attacks from monsters and other students, while also earning points in the process. The bird that had been resting on the boy's lap flew away as if it had sensed something, until another student suddenly appeared attacking our protagonist, who managed to react quickly and dodge that useless attack. He landed calmly on the ground, observing the one who had attacked him. The stranger said that he had managed to escape this time, but that he was already inside his trap. Our protagonist decided that he would test the strength of his own fists, and the extra summoned a magic barrier, claiming that he couldn't break it with physical strength. But our protagonist wanted to try putting some things into practice, because he hadn't hit the barrier, but had used his new interference ability, making the shield begin to crack completely, which left that poor extra genuinely scared. Without the protection that kept him separated from the protagonist, there was no way he could even keep his underwear intact, because our guy was using earth magic to take him down. The guy regretted that it had to happen, while Ayul said that he shouldn't feel proud that people like him were targeting him. Besides, he shouldn't announce his attacks every time he performed them. Anyway, the interference power is really interesting. He weakened with great ease a second circle spell, being able to destroy it completely with a first circle spell. For that brief encounter, the extra was eliminated from the exam. Since he was too careless, such an outcome was predictable. Upon defeating him, our protagonist gained 10 more points, which left him quite happy with this start to the test. While walking through the forest, he realized he's getting the hang of using interference, and soon it will also work against third circle spells. Still lost in his thoughts, he sensed a movement behind him, enough to put him on high alert. This time, our protagonist wouldn't wait for the attack, sending a large fireball towards the distraction. And what he saw left him quite impressed, because he had been surrounded by dangerous wolves. It seems the creatures approached after hearing the sound of his last battle. If he were an ordinary student, he would be complaining about the consecutive fights, but since he wants to dominate in an overwhelming way, he welcomes the excellent opportunity. One of the wolves sensed this would be difficult and started to howl. It was the command for the other creatures to attack as well, and our protagonist is eager to finish them all off. The guy is being watched closely by the supervisors. Some names from that academy are already standing out to the professors. Our protagonist, Adella, and some other clowns whose names I won't bother to learn. They are really impressive. If things continue like this, they will soon be among the top 10. And one of the professors said that is a very difficult task, but the woman with glasses agrees, and no one contradicts the following, that Ayul, commonly known as our protagonist, is an extremely talented person, and she wants to know if Instructor Chango has any doubts about that. Watching closely what the guy is doing in the forest, he agrees with that statement. Other professors are also enthusiastic about his performance, as he has been in first place in all the training sessions. Besides, he is far ahead of everyone else taking that test. The guy even knows the behavior of the wolves, and didn't kill any until the whole pack gathered to accumulate as many points as possible. Given his performance, the professors began to dream. Maybe he could win in the Olympics. And after successive battles, our protagonist was already very tired. The latter managed to gain 60 more points until he felt the ground beneath his feet begin to tremble. He thought it was an earthquake, but soon realized that the ground itself was moving. He finally understood what had happened in that place. From the ground emerged a huge body, as large as an elephant, and the creature had emeralds on its back. It was an emerald turtle. Who would have thought that such a rare monster would appear in this place? After dodging the creature, our protagonist faced it head-on. It was the first time he had encountered this type of monster in person, and it was time to face it with everything he had learned so far. Inside the Academy's main building, the professors were still watching closely. They were already aware that the most promising student of the year had just encountered the emerald turtle. One of the purposes of the evaluation is for students to learn how to escape danger and collaborate with each other. The turtle is a rare monster, no matter how much of a genius he is. They believe our protagonist is not capable of facing it alone. The turtle has very high defenses, being one of the natural enemies of mages in this world, and it is determined to turn our protagonist into its afternoon snack, sending a crushing and destructive blow towards him. But our boy manages to dodge it with ease. Is he sure that if he can defeat it he will get a high score? His thoughts were soon interrupted, as the turtle also showed great agility. Since he was in the air, he would need to build a defensive barrier to protect himself, and he used that shield as a platform, which prevented him from being hit by the turtle's tail. The professors are pleased that he managed to use the shield as a platform, but that wouldn't be enough to protect him from the turtle. It wasn't long before our protagonist sent his powerful flames towards it. While the fire burned, he couldn't see the result of his actions. He waited, hoping it would work against it, only to realize that all he did was enrage the turtle even more, an unexpected result, even for him, and he began to feel a little scared. Fleeing from the creature, he realized it would be a formidable challenge. Not even a fifth circle user could defeat it alone. And because it stores mana in its body, it's a very fast turtle. It was at that moment that his brilliant mind noticed something incredible. The creature has a human inside it, so there were a few things he could try at that moment. The first thing he did was strengthen the power in his legs, giving him the boost to dodge the attacks with great agility, forcing the creature to change direction. He also realized that this turtle could destroy things effortlessly. If any of those attacks hit him, it would be the end of his test, but he couldn't keep running forever. If he wanted to win, he would have to fight. Once again, he built his barrier to block that attack, feeling once more that the strength of that monster is truly impressive. He couldn't block that attack for long, so he began to use resonance. It had become a battle of strength, and he still couldn't move until he recovered the strength in his legs. This was the opportunity the boy wanted to take to launch another attack, this time using wind magic. He managed to get even closer to the poor creature. He had read about it in some books when he was a child. Its attacks overload its joints, causing it to lose some of its mobility. This is the window of opportunity he must seize immediately. Knowing he had to act, he started preparing an ice spear to attack the turtle. At the boy's audacity, the observing professors were very impressed, since that arrogant prodigy had decided not to flee. While striking the turtle, he used the interference he had learned, causing the turtle to spit blood. The attack proved to be quite dangerous for it, and with a single decisive blow, the turtle was sent to animal heaven. Not even our protagonist could believe he had achieved victory, receiving 1,000 points for it. A truly impressive result for someone like him. The test continues in that region. Inside the main house of our protagonist's family, another person is watching everything. On Ayun's side, the patriarch of the family witnessed all of this and cannot hide the pride he feels for his youngest son. Although the turtle is weak against ice attributes, he doesn't know how his son managed to do that with only 3 magic circles. Not even Ayun has an answer for that. They watch as the boy collects some of the creature's meat, as he needs to survive a few more days in that place. But the father of the year said that he didn't raise his son to be so weak, and they watch him leave with a large portion of turtle meat. Ayun has a question for the head of the family, who is curious about him. He wants to know how this young man can be so brave, since he has already realized that Jan and Violet are toxic individuals. The old man said that those are premeditated actions. When magic was still restricted, Ayul was excluded from the succession race, so his status in the family is miserable. But things have changed completely. He doesn't even know exactly how. But his son has developed great power, and his progress is not just remarkable, it's undeniable. And he asked for protection during the months leading up to the Olympics, so he could progress without issues and maybe even do something extraordinary. Hearing all this, Ayun couldn't hide his surprise. The boy wants to achieve worldwide recognition to increase his influence within the family and, after those 2 months of protection, He is sure that the interference from his older siblings will no longer be a problem. He has truly become a brave man. Night finally fell on the forest, but our protagonist has an abundant turtle meal to prepare. One of the rules of that test is that confrontations are not allowed between 11 at night and 1 in the morning. He knows it's for the student's safety, but it's an obstacle to developing his skills. Some academies have even stricter rules. This one needs to change immediately. At least he can bring some magical artifacts, and our protagonist can recover from his fatigue while using the cloak. Now he can enjoy his meal peacefully. Once he finished, he felt quite satisfied. After that, he began to hear movement in the bushes behind him. He realized it was his friend Sunanchan and his rival Adella. They sat around the protagonist's campfire, and he started asking them why they were working together. They said they had actually been fighting, but their time ran out. Sunanchan even pointed out that he was actually the one getting the beatdown. After they finished fighting, our protagonist guessed they had simply followed the smell of the barbecue he was making. His friend said the smell was really delicious, and that they would like a piece. Our protagonist stressed that it was his, but those two companions begged him to be generous. There wasn't much to do in that situation. Since there was more than enough food, it was better to share it with them than to waste the food. While they enjoyed the turtle meat, they thanked him very much for the gesture, and both of them ate as if it were the last meal of their lives. Our protagonist felt incredible for receiving so many compliments for something he had cooked over a makeshift fire. Adella asked if that meat was from a bear, a creature that lives in that forest and whose meat is really tasty. Our protagonist said no, and the girl knew that only 2 monsters from that place are edible. The second one is the emerald turtle. The meat of the other creatures is poisonous or tasteless, so it's not suitable for consumption. Adella was very surprised to realize he might have defeated an emerald turtle, but that's exactly what our protagonist had done. He said he faced the creature west of that position. His friend was also impressed, as he had only seen that creature online, and wanted to know how he managed to defeat it. But he completely ignored the explanation, totally focused on eating. Adella was also deeply impressed by this claim. She had never heard of a mage below 5 stars defeating that creature. After she said that, our protagonist began to summon some flames, creating a large tornado of fire in the place where they were. Adella realized that he was already at the 3rd magic circle, and the flames soon disappeared before her eyes. But the girl was even more surprised. Transformation magic is something from the 6th circle, which should be impossible. However, our protagonist remained quite confident. Now he was a little embarrassed by the admiration he had earned from those two. They said they would keep secret what he was about to tell them, but they wanted to know how he defeated the turtle. Ayul said that he pierced through its shell, but that didn't make sense to them. Since they were being filmed by the academy, the guy could confirm it once he got out of the forest. Even our protagonist was interested in watching his own battle. He said that he would be the first one to watch it, which made his friends thoughtful. But Ayul confirmed that they would fight fairly the next dawn. His friends said they wouldn't be able to beat him, and the girl wished him good luck because she also has something she is eager to show him. The second day of the test progresses, and the exam area is shrinking more and more. The professors know that only 4 students remain and want to know who will be victorious among them. A magical attack rapidly approaches our protagonist. He looks back in the direction it came from, skillfully managing to defend himself using his wind magic. He looks up. It's possible to tell where the attack came from. The approaching person says that he has already passed the supernova phase. A red-haired extra is upon our protagonist and wastes no time launching a furious attack from above, proving that his movements are indeed very fast. Even with all those skills, he failed to land any of his attacks. Ayun needed to create some distance, as he felt a bit pressured by those sudden and well-coordinated attacks. The red-haired extra finally shows his face, saying that our protagonist was very unlucky to run into him. That's Saiuk, a mage who uses close-quarters combat, and our protagonist said he was mistaken, as he was actually very lucky. That man gained authority in the academy thanks to his strength, mercilessly beating his opponents. His body fortification magic is truly impressive. Among those in his class, he is one of the physically strongest. Being a specialist in body fortification, he's not someone to be taken lightly. But unfortunately, he ran into the impenetrable barrier that is our protagonist. The battle turned into a contest of manliness. Our protagonist decided he would do the same, also fortifying his body for close-quarters combat. This greatly excited our dear extra, as this was his area of expertise. The professors watched the confrontation closely between the two. One of them guessed that this type of combat would favor the extra's natural abilities, since he stands out among the students in this type of fighting, besides being very experienced. But they can't ignore what happened with the turtle the day before. The protagonist is also impressive and manages to dodge the attacks with great ease, using the demon's eyes to see what's happening, a kind of dollar store Sharingan. He finally managed to identify his opponent's mana flow, realizing it was in his fists, but it was soon transferred to his knee, which meant he was going to execute a kick. As expected, all strikes of that type are extremely powerful. Our protagonist decided he would use his barrier to push him back. Even the extra was surprised that the barrier had been completely destroyed. He had never seen magic used that way, and began to wonder if the genius had really returned. But that was unlikely. It might just be a rumor. The more they fought, the greater his interest in the protagonist became, and he was determined to defend his pride, believing he would never lose in a hand-to-hand fight. Meanwhile, our protagonist saw a great opportunity he could seize, his fist completely coated in mana, launching a heavy blow at his opponent, who managed to block it using his own arms. This was not the outcome Ayul expected. Even the professors were impressed by the block executed by the extra, who immediately countered with a high kick aimed at the protagonist's head, which he had to dodge, actively to avoid being knocked out. His battle sense is truly impressive, but his reflexes are still unlimited. If he had suddenly used a fire spell, that would have decided the battle due to the damage that his opponent would have received. With burned arms, he would have been completely unable to fight at a high level. Our protagonist realized that the strategic advantage was his, surprising his enemy with a quick move, ready to strike him once more. About to receive the blow, the poor student adopted his defensive stance. This was something our clever protagonist was already expecting, but he wasn't going to make a frontal attack. He executed a sidekick that caught the defense by surprise. Only then did the extra realize that he had fallen for a feint. He hadn't even noticed when our protagonist had strengthened his legs. The pain that he feels in his abdomen is very real. It's as if his ribs have been broken, but he's a fighter, and that level of pain isn't enough to make him give up or compromise his will. He keeps attacking because that's how his heart is made. This supporting character is truly incredible. Let's hope he stays in the story. Our protagonist warned him that if he kept relying on his strength, his body would soon break, but like a true fighter, he completely ignored this advice as he furiously charged forward. His blows are unstoppable, but his agility isn't enough to reach the protagonist, who once again has a window of opportunity to strike him. The moment the fighter landed, he was caught by a surprise blow, brutally hitting his chin with a right uppercut. His entire body was launched by the impact of that attack. Our protagonist shakes his hand, trying to relieve some of the pain he felt as he watches his defeated opponent. For a brief moment, he managed to concentrate his mana on his chin to minimize the damage taken. Even so, he's semi-conscious on the ground. Even our protagonist was impressed by that man's combat skills. Both his offense and defense were highly refined. He was not an easy opponent. The day passed without major interference, and finally, night fell upon them. Now only 3 survivors remain in the test. Actually, there are only 2 left, our protagonist and his sweet rival. Inside one of our protagonist's family buildings, some envious people are gathered. They are his siblings, who are already wishing for him to fail in his development. They can't accept that all of this is being broadcast nationwide. Violet is very upset, since they can't sabotage him during this period. And now the young man is starting to get out of control. If things continue like this, soon, he will become a candidate for the succession, and that is completely unforgivable. Jian can't say a single word at this moment, which infuriates Violet even more, because she knows that her brother managed to defeat an emerald turtle. That should be impossible for someone in his condition. Besides, the video is already online, and the patriarch has probably seen it. Just like the rest of the family, Violet is losing her composure more and more, and her brother notices. He asked her to calm down, but that request was like adding fuel to the fire. She completely lost control, little by little. She began to sink deeper into despair, and Jian's patience reached its limit. He said it wouldn't happen again. Now Violet was scared. She apologized for her overreaction and begged not to be punished. Jian thoughtfully considered that possibility. He began to stroke the woman's head in a way that was clearly insincere. Since we know he's not a trustworthy person, he still said he had no reason to punish her, since they are siblings. Still very shaken, she thanked her brother while Jian thought that our protagonist is quite cunning, taking advantage of every good opportunity, and that if he continues to progress like this, there will be no way to avoid his charming intervention. Inside the forest where the test is taking place, the battle is raging. Adella uses all her skills, saying that this time she won't be caught by surprise by her opponent. She has seen the fights many times of the protagonist. This time she won't use the sun as an advantage to blind him, as they are illuminated by the moonlight. So she believes she won't give him a chance to counterattack, executing another powerful attack in his direction. And indeed, Ayul has to be completely focused on dodging all those blows. He was hit by a barrage of moon bullets and one of them grazed his arm. This is completely different from their first fight. The attacks are much more numerous. Dodging all of that will be impossible. Adella noted that the boy's techniques are weak long-range counterattacks and she is very focused, determined to emerge victorious. That's his weakness, she said, asserting that she would overcome his skills and efforts, causing a huge explosion with her attacks toward where our protagonist was. Ayul managed to avoid the worst, but he already feels distressed and exhausted from so much dodging. It was necessary to summon a magic barrier to protect himself, realizing he was being overwhelmed by brute force. He wants to better understand what she has figured out. And the girl is very sure that this is the right strategy to achieve victory. That volume of attacks is not something just anyone can do, but it's expected from someone from her family. Finally, our protagonist noticed something very interesting about Adella. That girl had reached the fourth circle of magic. Hiding one of his hands behind his back, Ayul was materializing an ice needle. Adella stopped her attacks, saying that the boy noticed quickly. Ayul heard her, but he was also acting cunningly, hiding an attack in the middle of the dust. It has been 4 days since she reached the fourth circle, and that's not all that happened. She took a deep breath, as if she were concentrating. In the sky, a blinding glow began to emerge. Ayul's attack was heading towards her with precision, but Adella was already completely and aware of it, stating that she wouldn't fall for such obvious tricks. With a simple wave of her hands, she completely nullified that surprise attack. Upon opening her eyes, she revealed they had changed. Each one had a mark, in the shape of a cross. Ayul knows that this is the heart's eye technique. Combined with the fourth circle, it could be very problematic. This is a secret technique of the girl's family, something that the master of the tower, Ayul, also managed to master it, although his is a different technique, a mystic eye focused on detection. Adella is combining power and range with versatility, which makes her extremely formidable. Even our protagonist recognized that she is a monster in human form. Adella stated once again that she would fight with all the weapons she possesses, as she isn't foolish enough to hold back against an opponent of Ayul's caliber. While attacking him, she asked when he would reveal the technique that was able to subjugate the emerald turtle. Our protagonist watches patiently as her attacks approach, saying that the time to reveal what he had done to her was drawing near. The color of his eyes had also changed. Ayul had completely mastered the mystic eyes. He can perfectly understand the attributes of that attack and the fundamentals of that spell. Using interference, he managed to completely repel the projectiles that would have hit him, leaving Adella surprised, as her attacks changed trajectory as soon as she launched them, not understanding what he had done. Ayul didn't give her the answer, but he wanted to know what she had seen from her own perspective, since she also has eyes capable of seeing hidden details. Inside the main house of the protagonist's family, a commotion occurs, and the best father in the galaxy is impressed by this man's reaction, since he also wants to know what kind of magic was able to alter a spell's trajectory. That seemed impossible. It's Davil Yui Sanchiol, Adella's father, and apparently our protagonist's future father-in-law. The best father in the galaxy said he didn't understand anything either, and his son's future father-in-law asked if he hadn't shared anything about that technique. But the old man insists he hadn't heard anything about it. Sanchiol found it strange that the boy was hiding things, and the old man said that in the last year his son had become quite bold, saying that he now has more secrets than a graveyard and has been sharing less and less. Sanchiol acknowledged that the boy had changed a lot during the year he spent away from home. The old man confirmed this, and they concluded that a man needs to leave home to grow up. He said that during the previous evaluation at the academy, he believed the boy had been lucky. He feels a little bad for saying this in front of the protagonist's father, but he thought Ayul would have a flash of talent and soon succumb to his own mediocrity. The truth is that the protagonist's father also believed it, as his son is incompatible with AI assistance. Sanchiol said that when he defeated his daughter, it wasn't because of skill, but because of his strategy in that fight. Soon he will be officially evaluated as well. When his limitations become public, he will fall. And right now it is Adella who has the opportunity to execute this. Sanchiol says that she is very promising, but there is a detail in everything they are talking about. The man acknowledged that he had underestimated the protagonist's abilities, who is now pressuring his daughter. He said he has something to confess to Ayul's father, revealing that he will be eternally grateful to his son. When his daughter lost sight of her life's purpose for the first time, there was nothing reflected in her eyes anymore. But now, shine like never before in her life. That's why he's happy that Ayul is back in the game, as it made his daughter rediscover her own motivation. While they had this conversation, they continued to watch the fight. The father of the year agreed with these words, acknowledging that this is something they should be thankful for. Finally, The last battle came to its conclusion, and the event organizers asked the survivors to end the fight. Our protagonist is in the middle of the dust trying to find the girl. His eyes show that he is very surprised, as they are both still standing. Adella stares at him. Despite being exhausted, Ayul began to regret what had happened. If he had a little more time, he would have won. Adella scoffed at this claim, as she was in a much more favorable position. The two looked at each other once more, intimidatingly, until one of the professors arrived in the forest saying that they both must stop now, because it's time to return to the academy. The next day, they returned to their normal routine. Adella firmly believes that she had the advantage during the fight. However, Ayul refuses to agree with her, as he didn't see it that way. The girl said she could see the trajectory of his strategy. She needed 5 minutes to defeat him. Ayul said that in that same amount of time she would completely exhaust her mental strength, which would make her lose. Sunchan watches the two argue without saying a word. He said that if they were going to keep arguing, they should do it in another room, because in his he would like to have some peace. The two of them got angry at that comment, telling him to shut up. Sadly, he said he just wanted to watch the recordings of the test with them and didn't want them to fight. He even prepared some drinks and snacks. He even bought banana milk. Still, his friends kept arguing. After he mentioned the food, his friends started to behave better. Ayul even said that it was impossible to watch the television if he kept sitting in front of it. Now they could watch it all from the beginning, but they were surprised to find that the recording was 14 hours long. And that was exactly what they did that day. When it was all over, Sunchan was completely exhausted, sleeping on the floor. He was already lost in the deepest dimensions of the realm of Morpheus. Adella started to laugh, which made our protagonist feel very curious. While covering the sleeping friend with a sheet, she said it had been a lot of fun. Watching 14 hours of combat analysis is exhausting. She thought our protagonist would give up halfway through. Ayul admitted that he had the same impression of her, that she would be the one to quit. But they managed to make it to the end. Only Sunchan didn't make it. Adella said he had a great friend there. Ayul agreed with that, acknowledging that Sunchan is an excellent friend. Then, for no apparent reason, Adella apologized to him. Ayul was bewildered and asked her why she had done that so suddenly. For a whole year she acted as if she didn't know him and kept her distance on purpose, and now she realizes that it was a mistake. She could have done something better. Ayul said he didn't need to be sorry, as he was the one who rejected the signal she had given. He was the one who wanted to keep their distance, and he shouldn't worry about it. He also tried to stay away from the sleeping maiden who was there. Immediately, Sunchan was roused from his deep sleep and asked if that was really true. Ayul said that he already knew, that he had been awake for a few minutes, stating that he is no longer the same person he was 1 year ago because he has obtained a new power. Those words made his friends think deeply. Ayul continued his speech, saying that he also has trustworthy allies and has something to show them. With his hands, he began to weave a sphere of mana. His two friends were soon impressed, saying that it should be impossible, but he had managed to materialize the secret technique of Adella's family, the moon bullet. Ayul confirmed that what their eyes saw was not a mistake, and that it was a spell he had created. Sunchan asked if his alteration magic could target the formula of a spell, and that is exactly what he is capable of doing, in addition to having mystic eyes that allow him to see those formulas. Adella now understood how he was able to grasp her secret technique. That kind of thing is not taught to people outside the family. What he showed was created based on what he analyzed from her fights. For that, he had to see it several times to perfect the technique. She now understood how a boy managed to defeat the emerald turtle. Ayul confirmed that he used alteration magic, weakening the durability of the monster's shell, which is basically made of magic. Sunchan is deeply delighted to know that his friend is a monster, and Ayul asked if he still needed to explain how he was able to alter the trajectory of the bullets. The condition for the interference is to deeply understand the target technique, which is why he didn't use it at first, because he couldn't do it. And that's exactly what happened. Ayul is impressed that she figured it out so quickly. In their last fight, she focused only on the moon bullets, and our protagonist managed to analyze the technique very well. Now, Adella understands that not varying her techniques during the battle was her fatal mistake. She asked him if that technique has any weaknesses. Ayul revealed that analyzing mana is a bit demanding. He can only interfere with spells that are very close to him, and in a real battle, time is limited, so he can only slightly alter the trajectory. Adella asked if he is capable of completely changing a spell's direction to return it to its caster. He said, that is still impossible because there isn't enough time. She acknowledged that it's a shame. If reflection were possible, the result would be incredible. Still, his techniques are truly impressive. Sunchan began to raise his hands desperately, asking for some attention, ordering his friend to sit down and listen, carefully. He wants to know why he was revealing such a powerful secret to them. Both Ayul and Adella are impressed that he still doesn't understand what's happening. They are already thinking about the academies, Olympics. Only then did Sunshine realize what these two mad lads are planning to do. Our protagonist needs a team and intends to take them both with him. For a brief moment, his friend couldn't hide that he felt moved by the invitation. But he has a reservation to make, and Ayul wants to hear it. Agrees with Adella's lesson, but believes he doesn't have enough skill to participate. Even though they are only students, there are greater talents in that academy. But our protagonist said that there is no problem and that, no matter what, he will make sure his friend also participates, which left Sanhan very worried. Although there were many limitations to the protagonist's technique, Adella understood that this is his greatest asset. If they managed to use it, they could protect their magic stone while attacking the enemy. It would be very useful in a siege battle and, in fact, in this type of combat, he will excel, since his technique was made for this. Seeing Ayul's confidence, she asked him if he had any other aces up his sleeve. Our protagonist showed a faint smile. Of course he has other tricks. At night, in his dorm, he finished another session of studying, and it was time to enter, once again, the book's dimension. Heading straight to that library full of knowledge, Mimir saw that the successor had arrived, and they greeted each other quickly. She said that he was late this time, asking if he hadn't taken first place. But he said he would get it anyway, and that the points from the Emerald Turtle were decisive. He asked if the girl remembered that he needed to win the gold medal in a certain competition, and Mimir recalled that he had mentioned the Olympics, and that was what it was about exactly. He had already told his friends about the event and also about the interference. Mimir said that the boy himself had said he wouldn't talk about it until he had completely perfected the technique, but he revealed the secret too quickly. But for Ayul, he believes he did it at the right time, which left Mimir impressed, since he had completely mastered the interference technique, saying that the successor is truly an incredible person, which brought the protagonist to his next topic. He needs some books about the realm of destruction. It's time to perfect the third magic circle. After his session of training, he received a call from the master of the Blue Tower. He immediately answered that important call. Kim said he saw the video of the test, and was very impressed that he had defeated an Emerald Turtle. Our boy responded modestly, saying it was luck. However, the leader of the Blue Tower is also impressed with how he fought on equal terms with Adella, since she is in the fourth circle. Besides wanting to know how he was able to pierce that tough shell, he asked him how he changed the trajectory of the girl's attacks. The first possibility he considered was distortion magic, but he knows it wasn't that. Ayul had to apologize to him, saying that he couldn't share the details of his magic yet. Kim said he was very excited and apologized, saying that the boy didn't need to answer, because a mage has the right to keep his secrets. However, he said that the boy's techniques are very fascinating, and that one day he will understand how they work. Also, he had one last message for him. He called him to talk about the elemental crystal they had already discussed on another occasion. Our boy wanted to know if the news was good or bad. Kim said that the news could only be of one kind. Of course, he brought good news. Everything was already completely prepared. Our protagonist grew worried at those words, wondering if he was causing them too much trouble, saying there was no need to rush. Kim assured him that everything was fine, that all the artisans there are excellent, and that they are even more eager to work with that raw material. Our protagonist hoped that everyone was in that state of mind. Kim said that he didn't need to worry about the artifact, which made the boy feel very grateful. He was about to end the call, but Ayul still had something else to say. I have another request for you. Kim thought the request was related to what happened with the infiltrated instructor, but that would depend on how the Tower Master interpreted the event. Kim grew increasingly interested in the proposal the young man might offer. He said that it is about this year's Olympics. He would like the artisans of the Magic Tower to be the engineers for the national team. After talking with the boy, Mimir was surprised to learn that he will be facing Fifth Circle users, but that was the condition imposed by the Master of the Blue Tower, and the boy wonders if he really made the right decision. Kim asked him if he really wants to use the artisans from his tower in the same way engineers are used. The first answer he gave was negative. Ayul understood that his request was not very reasonable, but Kim continued, saying that would be his initial answer. However, if the boy managed to defeat a Fifth Circle user, the answer might change. That left our boy quite surprised. In those Olympics, he is going to face users who are already in the Fifth Circle, and Kim has no doubts about the boy's potential. Assigning his artisans to this competition will cost a lot of money, and it is difficult to commit to that for honor alone. So the boy must provide solid proof that he can win the gold medal. Mimir wants to know what the successor's plans are because no matter how she imagines it, he won't be able to defeat a user of the Fifth Circle in his current state. Ayul still has a deadline of 10 days to prepare. Mimir wants to know if he really thinks he can establish countermeasures in such a short time. He might have a chance if he manages to do it, but perfecting the technique in 10 days will not be easy. She wants to know if it is really worth doing all this to get the support of the Blue Tower. Ayul said yes. They are the only ones in the country who can customize artifacts and get them approved for the Olympics. That is why he needs the Blue Tower. Mimir understood that they have great skill. Ayul said that the artifacts from the Blue Tower have a 10% performance difference in comparison to other artisans, and they are also the only ones capable of tuning the elemental crystal. She understood that the performance difference in artifacts is crucial for determining victory, so they really need that support. Ayul emphasized again that they need the artisans from the Blue Tower. Mimir wants to know when they are going to move on to the third page of the challenge because they must hurry, but the boy wants to read all the books she had prepared before starting the trial, which made the girl quite excited, and his motivation. She said that when he gets to the third challenge he should send her his thanks, saying that he is doing really well. Ayul wants to know if she knows someone there, but the girl said it's a secret, because if he knew now it wouldn't be fun. In one of the protagonist's family buildings, a meeting is being held. The attendees are very cheerful because they are drinking the finest free wine. Several flatterers say that Jian will be the next head of the family, and he said he is lucky for that, since everything he had achieved up to that point was thanks to the help of his sycophants. And they keep saying that the future will be bright under the leadership of this envious man, until one of them said that the youngest son is earning his place in the Sunday. That completely enraged Jian, and the clueless man continued talking about the achievements of the youngest son, who was able to single-handedly defeat an emerald turtle. That was definitive proof that he is still an exceptional genius, not to mention that he also fought against a fourth circle magic user, being able to withstand the secret attacks used by her family, which are based on the lunar element. Resisting her is already a formidable feat. It's even hard to believe he is someone who doesn't use AI assistance. After that, a murmur took over the place. They started talking about the protagonist's achievements, and they are already eager to witness his performance in the Olympics. Even the patriarch is interested in the boy's performance. That only makes Jian's envy grow even more, as at this rate he could lose his favoritism in the association, and being there started to become very uncomfortable for him. He began to remember when our protagonist was still a child. Everyone only talked about him. He thought his brother had been defeated, but now he is returning to the top. The extras in that hall noticed Jian's absence. All he left behind was his broken wine glass on the floor. He had to leave in a hurry while thinking that the situation was definitely not good. The hatred he was feeling towards our protagonist was at stratospheric levels, reaching the absurd conclusion that his brother must die. My God, what a degenerate family. It's the fault of that father who gave his children no love. Completely oblivious to his brother's conspiracy, our protagonist continues with his training. He studies with great dedication and had already gone through several books in that room. He finally felt prepared. Mimir asked him if he had finished reading everything, and he said yes, that those were all the available books, so he was done. She said that he had read everything about destruction and asked if the successor had increased his knowledge. Ayul replied that he hadn't, and that he hadn't understood anything at all. Mimir wanted to know if he had at least reached a superficial conclusion, but the boy couldn't grasp the structure of the concept. She said it's natural that he hasn't fully understood it yet. It's like teaching someone to flap their wings. In any case, the requirements had not been met. He still couldn't comprehend destruction. Ayul said that. Her drawing was very bad, but that he had understood the concept from the explanation. That left the girl a bit affected, who thought her drawing was very instructive, and to understand the conditions, he needs to access the third challenge. Mimi claimed the answers would be on that page. Still very curious, he wants to know if the person he should thank will be the one to teach him, and she said that if he was that curious, he should see her soon, since he had finished reading the books. But that was strange, and he wanted to know if there was anything preventing her from sharing more details about the third challenge. She said it wasn't a restriction, but a promise they have between them. After finishing his interaction with her, he went back outside. Now, our protagonist was interested in the nature of that promise that kept her from talking about the third challenge, so he took the main book in his hands. Opening the codex, he was ready to attempt the challenge and placed his hand on the page for the trial. Upon being sent to another dimension, he was met by several branches. This was different from his other experiences, which left our boy a bit surprised. He briefly closed his eyes due to the excess light until he could get a better look at the place he was in. Where he was now was definitely an immense forest, and not just any forest. All the trees there were excessively tall. He thought he would be in a strange dimension like last time, but he found no guide and couldn't hear his master's voice. He decided to start walking through the forest and began to wonder if he was really on the page for the third challenge. After climbing onto a high rock, he realized the place was truly vast. almost ridiculously impressive. The magic his master wielded was beyond imagination. No matter how far he walked through this place, it seemed endless. As he approached a water source, he was still wondering what kind of trial this was, until a powerful light source began to appear from the treetops, as the ground began to shake. His first thought was that it was an earthquake, but he soon realized he was mistaken. Something was watching him. He immediately sensed that he might be in danger. A creature even larger than the emerald turtle was staring at the protagonist. This made no sense. The boy was terrified by the creature he was seeing. Even though he was very close to it, he felt the monster hadn't noticed him yet. Still, the creature roared at him, sending the boy flying into the lake. Slowly, he managed to identify what it was. Its eyes were slitted like a reptile's, and its body was covered in tough scales like a crocodile's, and with claws and fangs as sharp as dangerous blades. He had no doubt. That dangerous creature wasn't even classified. It was definitely an earth dragon. He thought they were just a myth, and began to wonder if the trial was to defeat this creature. But the more he watched it, the more he realized that it was an impossible feat in his current state. The boy was paralyzed by fear. The creature's breath alone was enough to make the mana in the air tremble. It was on a completely different level. Ayul already doubted if he could even escape the creature's attack. His hands were trembling, overcome by the most primal fear. Visceral, and the creature now had its eyes fixed on him. Ayul wasn't fast enough to run, and the most immediate problem he had now was that his body refused to move. If the creature decided to attack him, there would be absolutely nothing he could do, until he started to feel intrigued by something else. The earth dragon hadn't attacked yet, nor had it even gotten close to him. Ayul began to wonder if there was something that was preventing that from happening, until a voice said that this was truly impressive. Our boy looked desperately toward the source of the sound, seeing the feet of that woman walking on water. She was amazed that, even in front of a creature he couldn't defeat, he hadn't lost hope. Even in the face of overwhelming danger, he remained calm and composed. Poor woman, she has no idea what happened between the protagonist and his underwear. She said she had tested him and that he should be able to move now. Still scared, Ayul asked her, "Who was that woman?" Her name is Elena, known in the past as the guardian of the forest and a great mage, as well as an old friend of the boy's master. But the surprises in that dimension don't end there, because he realized that this woman isn't human, she's a dryad. She asked him if she should go in another direction, but the boy was still too scared to speak normally. She began to speak to the creature that, even driven by desire, did not enter her domain, and she respected that. Acknowledging the creature's patience, she said she would forgive it even though it had ruined her garden, and now she had an order for it. Return to the forest where you belong. She called the creature a fallen noble. She immediately blew on something she held in her hands, sending a green energy that flew through the forest. Ayul watched everything attentively, noticing that the entire forest responded to her commands. That woman was truly powerful. She was the one in charge of that whole place, and if the creature didn't understand her words, it would be sent to the void where the forgotten dwell. She stared at the creature, which began to writhe in pain as it was swiftly attacked. Ayul was very impressed to see that several wounds appeared on the earth dragon's body. That sudden attack made no sound, but he was sure that something had pierced the creature's body, and he began to wonder what that woman could have done. The wounds were clearly visible and soon began to heal. Still, the creature remained in front of them. The woman said that was just a warning, and that it should leave, and that was exactly what the creature did. Ayul had noticed that the wounds regenerated in the blink of an eye. Now he wants to know who the woman who managed to scare away a mythological creature was, because she had such a calm and serene expression. Approaching the boy, she asked if he was okay, and he said yes, thanks to her intervention. Still, she suspected the boy might be in shock, asking if the successor could accompany her. She led him through the forest, until they reached a house built inside a tree. She offered him a tea made with herbs that his master used to enjoy. He would soon feel calmer, and Ayul said that. Was deeply grateful trying the tea that was offered to him. He soon began to feel the effects of that herb. A single sip was enough to bring peace to his mind, something truly impressive. So he started to drink more from that cup. The woman was glad that he had enjoyed the drink, asking him if he liked the taste. Completely grateful, he said it was the tastiest tea he had ever had in his entire life. Appreciating the boy's words, she asked him if he was feeling calmer now, and he said he was embarrassed for having shown a side of his personality that was unusual. The woman said he didn't need to worry about anything that had happened. Just the fact that he didn't wet himself in front of the creature was already very impressive, and he realized that it really was an earth dragon. The creature's presence was so threatening that he couldn't move. Although it is the king of that forest, it doesn't dare to approach her territory. But it must have been difficult to resist the opportunity. The boy didn't understand what she meant, and she said that the mana he carries is dense, which makes him a delicacy for the creature. She is sure that the dragon found him very appetizing, and the hunger must have made it forget its fear of her. Then she asked the boy if he had any other questions. Very intrigued by this dimension, he asked if they were really inside the book. The world felt so real that it didn't seem artificial at all. He had walked for several minutes through that forest. It was different from the other pages. Then she was going to tell him what this place was. The third challenge spans from page 214 to 232. Her words left the boy even more surprised. He wanted to know if that earth dragon was created with magic, but the woman didn't know how to answer either. It's not real, but it's not a fake creature either. Ayul wanted a better explanation, and she said that the entire place was created from memories of the past. The world inside that book is a replica of the forest that once existed. To make it easier for him to understand, she said that this world is just a copy, so it's not real, but it's not an illusion either. Ayul couldn't deny that he was growing more and more impressed with the vastness of these pages, and all of this is recorded in the pages of that book. He doesn't understand how this can be possible. The woman doesn't know the details either. The only ones who can fully understand it are her master and the successor, who in the current situation is our protagonist. When he reaches the level of his master, he will be able to understand it all. The boy wants to understand why his master created this entire space. The woman said that it was made so that he could comprehend a certain magic. Ayul grew increasingly curious to know what it was, and the woman perfectly understands the state he is in. She paused to reflect in silence while looking at the boy. The boy was surprised by what he had heard. He needs to perfect the third circle to learn a magic essential for destruction. Eyes that see through the essence of magic. The divine eyes. These golden eyes can see through anything, and the woman showed that she has mastered this technique. Ayul was realized that this is the mystic eyes version of his master's style. The woman said she doesn't have experience yet. He perfected the technique. The only ones who can completely master it are the master and his successor. Yenor asked her to take charge of teaching him, and her memory exists for that very purpose. Inside the city, our protagonist's father is on the move. He asked one of his men to update him on what is happening. Aeon already has the news the patriarch had previously requested. It is about Mingji and Minuk, who are not that interested in the things the young master does. The unexpected thing is that Violet has also not shown any sign of doing absolutely anything, showing that the patriarch's order is being executed really well by them. Although Violet is acting kindly, he does not believe she will continue that way towards her brother, and is probably just being cautious because she knows she is being watched. However, the father of the year already knows his children, and asks specifically about January. He found out that he seems to be quiet, and although it is suspicious, not even the party he held the previous day showed any signs of anything suspicious. The patriarch is now aware of what is happening. He imagines his children have learned to separate personal matters from official ones, and told his subordinate to maintain protection over our protagonist until the deadline was met, something he would do with all his effort. He used a spell to block the sound, as the information he was about to reveal was confidential. It is information about someone in that family who is in contact with the Black Tower. They have already investigated 32 people, including the elders, as well as high-ranking executives. The patriarch listened to this information with great interest, and the conclusion of Aeon's investigation is that all of them are clean, but the patriarch remains suspicious. Of the people who were investigated, 5 of them have very suspicious backgrounds, and if things had been more intense, they could have captured someone involved. The patriarch now knows the identity of each of them. He stated that he would resolve this matter personally. Meanwhile, our protagonist is still inside that forest of lies that is not a lie at all. The woman is committed to teaching him that technique. They would immediately begin the training so he could master the divine eye. Our boy wants her to make the training as intense as possible. She felt thrilled by the successor's stance, which is very similar to the master's. As she placed her hands over his eyes, she asked him to close them. Now she would slowly channel her mana into him. While this was happening, she would explain how the divine eye works. This would only be possible after reaching the 4th circle and would require other books. Jan recalled that of the books he had already accessed, he did not see any reference to that technique. The knowledge was sealed until reaching the 4th circle. He asked if she was talking about the Book of Mimir. The woman was impressed by this information, asking if he knew something about it, and our protagonist said he had a message from Mimir for her. The girl said he was doing very well, and that they both had a mutual promise. In the woman's silence, she apologized to the successor. She felt that for a moment her mana had wavered and thought that maybe she had said something unnecessary, but things soon returned to normal. She apologized for what had happened, but was relieved that he knew. They would talk more about that other girl soon, but now they had to focus on the divine eye training. The reason he's restricted to the 4th circle is no secret. It's because she is on the 3rd trial. Elena was put in that position to handle all the explanations. There is a limitation on the amount of information that can be stored in that book, and she acknowledges that the master knows how to bring out the best in people. Our boy had heard something about the limitation of knowledge a book can contain through Mimir. The trial pages and the successor's verification demand a huge amount of magic, which cannot be contained in a single book. The rest is compiled in the other volumes. Elena continued to infuse her mana into the boy's body. She said that everything was already prepared, asking Ayul to open his eyes. That woman's mana had perfectly synchronized with his infinite circle, to the point that he couldn't distinguish it from his own, and he began to feel something different in his eyes. Elena knew it might seem strange at first, but she had completely blocked the boy's optic nerves, making him temporarily blind. However, it was still too early for him to be surprised. The divine eye is an additional sense beyond the ones he already possesses, and to perfect it, all other senses must be eliminated. The ability to feel touch, to smell fragrances or perceive taste would gradually disappear. Even his hearing, Ayul felt completely isolated. With the boy's body lying on the floor, Elena invited him to enter the world of the dead. She waited patiently as she watched the boy's body. He was immersed in a place where his senses no longer worked, unable to perceive anything. He could no longer tell if he was standing or sitting. He had lost all sensation, completely isolated from the outside world. He couldn't be sure if his body was functioning normally. It was as if he wasn't even alive, a truly terrifying sensation. It wasn't just visual darkness. It was as if he were immersed in absolute solitude. Definitely, if hell exists somewhere, it must be like what he was feeling. But the boy knew he needed to stay focused. All of this was nothing more than training, and the divine eye was beyond his senses, giving him the opportunity to see through the darkness. So he began to concentrate to visualize mana. It was necessary for him to put all his attention on that task, and time kept passing as he tried to refine his ability. Upon observing the results, Elena began to feel truly surprised. No one can remain so calm with all their senses completely sealed. Just 1 minute is enough for people to start flirting with madness. In the second minute, they already think about giving up on life, and after 3 minutes, it can become irreversible. She, better than anyone, knows how terrifying this can be, and she had only planned to show the boy how unsettling the situation could be. He had to adapt to it little by little, taking small steps within that feeling of complete isolation. And the successor before her remained completely unfazed, even after 3 minutes. Only then did she realize the forest was resonating with his mana, so it was safe to continue with the training. And that was exactly what she did in the following minutes, realizing he was truly amazing. 20 minutes had already passed in that state, and his breathing was still calm and his circles stable. That was the successor chosen by Idret. She realized the master already knew he would be capable. Ayul asked if she could hear his voice, which left the woman completely astonished. He was asking her to suspend the sensory block. Elena said she would do as he asked. Ayul stood up, greatly relieved, because now he could feel himself breathing. As he stretched his body, Elena asked if he was feeling okay, but she was curious, wanting to know how he managed to overcome that sensation, which must have been a terrifying experience for him. And in fact, just remembering it was truly distressing, but he figured the training had been planned to be safe, so he kept his mind completely empty, entering a state of hypnosis, concentrating solely on the task of seeing the mana. Elena said he couldn't have overcome that fear with hypnosis alone. The boy agreed, saying that he almost gave up halfway through. His body couldn't follow his mind's orders. The darkness seemed eternal, a hell of loneliness. When despair was about to destroy his concentration, he latched onto a solid thought. At least his life is much better than it was 1 year ago, when he discovered he wasn't suited for modern magic, when all his dreams were denied by a simple statement, being considered an outcast by his family and his father. He was already living his personal hell, and that training was much better than the despair he had felt. The light of the moon breaks through the canopy of the trees, bringing light to the entire forest. Outside, she asked if he was feeling a little better, and he said yes. Understanding that blocking his senses is a necessary path to advance, Elena began to get scared by the successor's resilience, but he assured her that he felt much better. That whole experience was now in the past, as he felt immense gratitude for finally finding his own special path. Elena couldn't hold back her tears upon witnessing something so moving. She remembered the master. And, oh my God, it seems she's a woman. Who would have thought? These memories made her even more emotional. Ayul looked back and thanked Elena for what she had done for him. For a moment, she didn't understand, but even in the darkness he could see her mana, a very gentle energy. That was what helped him feel at ease. That was what inspired him to keep going. She appreciated the compliment she received from the boy, remembering the words she once heard from the master. It seems she's not a woman. The master is actually a man. She never expected to hear words like that again. As they sat down for tea, Ayul said he was going back and forth between that place and the Book of Mimir. Elena was glad to know that the girl was okay. It was very pleasant to hear that news, but the boy said he had only delivered a message reminding her. Mimir's joy in handing them over. The woman said that if he found the girl, he must have heard about her in the forest, but he said no, stating that the two of them had made a promise and that he couldn't tell her anything. Elena understood that the girl still remembered him, but that she is no longer able to keep the promise, leaving our protagonist quite confused, and the woman apologized for making the atmosphere a bit awkward. Ayul said that it was fine, and she continued to provide information. If he knows about this promise, it means that Mimir must have taken quite an interest in him. She is sure that's what happened, and began to think that maybe they are involved. Ayul confirmed that the relationship they have is very good, and he would like to know what that promise is. Elena noticed that he was thinking a lot about the topic, but she assured him it was a secret just between them. Not even the master knows its contents, but Ayul is a very curious person, and knows that in the past, the two of them must have been real people. Elena was surprised that Mimir hadn't spoken about it yet, saying that she can't answer that question, and that she wouldn't be the one to reveal its contents. Faced with this, our protagonist resigned himself, acknowledging that an oath cannot be broken. Elena deeply thanked the successor for his understanding regarding this. Once outside, Ayul announced that he was leaving, stating that he would be in her care. And Elena said that she also would need to train. Before leaving, he had one more question to ask. He wanted to know what kind of relationship Elena has with Mimir. The woman said that they are just friends, and together with Ray, they are in charge of protecting the magic of Bayer as student constellations, but still connected. Now, our protagonist heads to the other book, announcing his arrival with great enthusiasm. Mimir said that he had returned too quickly this time. The boy said he had class the next day, which is why he came back so fast. The girl wanted to know if he received proper training, and our protagonist assured her that he did, revealing to her that he had mastered the divine eyes, noticing that the mana around her was floating lazily, which annoyed the girl. He realized that she must have also completed the training. Mimir found it strange that he was fine after such training, but Ayul was fascinated by the things he couldn't see, mesmerized by the girl's mana, which is very serene despite being cold. Only then did she reveal that she is a cold person. So they went to have tea, and there she found out that the successor was fine even with his senses blocked, wondering if Elena might have been soft on him, since her heart is soft. She even guessed that it was the magic of the forest that helped the boy, which he didn't understand, and she asked if he hadn't done the mana circulation therapy, but he hadn't, since he hadn't developed any trauma. Now, this version of the story became too intriguing for her. It's impossible not to develop trauma after going through such an experience. He must have done something, and Mimir demanded that he reveal any hidden plan he might have put into practice, revealing to her what his life was like 1 year ago, leaving the girl very impressed. Naturally, she was very upset with the protagonist's family. And who wouldn't be, right? 1 year ago, he was wandering these lands without any purpose, while everyone had expectations for that prodigy, which only made things worse. That's what helped him overcome that hell of loneliness. Mimir had always sensed a very dark side to success, perhaps because he came from a similar environment. Now he understands it much better. Yule didn't expect her to show so much empathy toward him. The more he understands these, other women, the more they understand him in turn. That made him feel a little embarrassed for a moment. Mimir immediately changed the subject, asking if he could meet his deadline. Yule is very confident in his abilities. He's going to achieve it because he realized he's a very lucky person and there's nothing that can stop him now. He needs to keep moving forward. The books he uses for studying rest on his desk, and our boy continues to reflect on Elena's words. The divine eyes grow in alignment with the infinite circle. The first circle reveals the color of mana, the second its fragmented structure, and the third reveals the essence of magic. To master it completely, he must be able to see mana whenever he wants, so he needs to use that technique naturally. But the boy began to wonder if he would be able to do it. Just then, he remembered that he had received a message from the Blue Tower and they had decided which fifth circle mage he would face. The man's name is Bob and he is 29 years old. Our protagonist was surprised as if he had seen him before. Morning came to Obelisk Academy. Several students. They were inside the training hall. Sunan-chan watched his friends training and wondered if the two of them were still human, because the girl had skill and dexterity far above normal, sending multiple attacks toward Yule, who waited patiently for her to approach, summoning shields to protect himself, completely. Adella found out about the message from the Blue Tower and was surprised that they had sent it, with a strategic plan. That's what happened. He didn't receive the person's identity, but a complete strategic guide, and they had to take advantage of this opportunity. Adella was about to say a few more things, but she realized that she needed to focus on the training. Her vision was momentarily blinded, and that wind magic managed to get close to her, which left her very impressed. Yul calmly approached her, saying that he still didn't know what the tower's intention was and wanted to know what his friend thought about it. As he offered her his hand, she asked if she could take a look at that file too. After reviewing the information, she confirmed that the protagonist's assessment was correct. This is a strategic guide. Sun and Chan didn't want to be left out and wanted to see it too. Adella also said the assessment was very accurate. Perhaps it's a way for the master of the Blue Tower to show his consideration, demonstrating that Yul must continue to improve his skills. The boy, for his part, understood it as a way to gain an advantage. Sunan Chan said that no matter what it was a good thing, and indeed it was. But they still needed to keep training hard, which left Sunan Chan disappointed, as he wanted to rest a bit more. He wanted a longer break, since he hadn't even caught his breath. Yul said he needed to improve his stamina, leaving his friend quite frustrated. While he was running, a huge explosion occurred behind him. Sun Chan asked the careless ones to be more careful, because they were inside an enclosed space and were wrecking the training room. The day passed and the students returned to their dorms. Adella arrived at her room completely exhausted, throwing herself onto the bed, ready to sleep immediately. Although she knew she needed to change her clothes, but her exhaustion was so intense that she would have to wait until the next morning. She remembered that the moon bullet of the protagonist was already faster and stronger than hers. The girl started to think about what was happening. Even though she was trying so hard, there was still a huge difference between them. This couldn't go on like this, and she realized that she needed to train even harder and would dedicate herself more and more, because she didn't want to lose to her rival in techniques from her own family. It was no time to sleep and rest. She decided to take a cold shower and watch the recording of the training from that day. Meanwhile, in the protagonist's room, he had once again entered that book. Walking through the forest with his eyes closed, he didn't imagine that blocking his senses would no longer be necessary. Easily finding Elena, the woman noticed that he could now see mana with ease, but the boy still suffers from headaches if the period is prolonged. However, he can now see mana whenever he wants. Now they could move on to the next step of the training. Elena said she would use her divine eyes to see his magic circle. As she observes it, she will see the essence of magic, contemplating the spaces where it can be broken. Joel strives to see those spaces, and Elena said that every technique has empty spaces. He must learn to use them to erase the magic and break a magic circle. This is called disassembly, a way to completely neutralize the magic circle. By optimizing the mystic gaze to the maximum, he will be able to nullify magic, and she asked the boy to try it too, as she had a feeling he would learn quickly. Creating a magic circle in front of him, he began to pay close attention to it, finally noticing what he had previously ignored. Its mana is truly warm and gentle, but he still can't see the circle spaces, and he began to focus only on this. He knew he needed to analyze the circle's structure, and, strengthening his mystic eyes, he did as she had instructed. No magic formula is completely perfect. This is a phrase from Mimir's book. Knowing this, every magic formula has empty spaces. Seeing through the essence of magic, hearing the sound of mana, helps him find the technique's flaws. Finally, the successor seems to have noticed something. Elena was increasingly pleased with his progress. Jewel tried to use magic disassembly for the first time. At the academy, the students' class had ended, and they had received instructions about the Olympiad. The protagonist's father, along with the leader of the Blue Tower, were also at that meeting. Outside, the two met once again. Kim didn't expect him to appear personally at that meeting, and the patriarch of the family didn't expect to run into him, saying he had no reason to be there. And the man said, who was only participating as a sponsor, which intrigued the patriarch. Only then did Kim reveal that he was scouting the opportunity, and the patriarch understood that the Blue Tower must be sending its artisans to the competition. They are still considering the possibility, which is why he's scouting, but the patriarch already finds it surprising since the Blue Tower is not in a position to send its artisans to the Olympics. Kim said that things were going very well and that this year's Olympics are worth the investment, which made the patriarch even more curious, until the leader of the Blue Tower revealed that with Ayul leading the team, the Korean team could win a gold medal. After hearing this, the patriarch was a bit surprised. Kim assumes that he also has high expectations for his son, bringing his hands to his chin. He soon realized that his son must have also made a proposal to that man. Kim couldn't hide that it was exactly what had happened. The patriarch wants to know what he promised, and the leader of the Blue Tower was silent for a moment. The boy promised that he would win the gold medal. He asked for the tower's artisans to be his engineers and asked what he told the patriarch. The head of the family said that the boy promised victory and asked him to offer protection until that happened, acknowledging that his son had changed a lot in the last year, becoming a very self-confident person. Kim asked if the patriarch accepted this proposal without any counter-conditions. He said that he has his own terms and returned the question, as he wanted to know if the leader of the magic tower believed the words of a child. Kim realized that the man and his son are quite alike, revealing that he had set his own condition. As long as the boy fulfills it, he will provide the engineers. It didn't take long for the patriarch to become interested in what it is. Ayul needs to defeat a 5th circle mage in a duel. The best father in the galaxy really liked this challenge. If his son wins, it means he's good. And if he loses, he will be miserably beaten in the process. Both outcomes please him, and they soon agreed that the patriarch would also watch the duel. Our boy continues to go to the forest to train, and those training sessions are very exhausting. Elena brings some more tea, saying that he is working very hard. Finally, his training had concluded. Ayun said that Elena is also working very hard, and that thanks to her he managed to get where he is, and she was already worried, thinking that maybe she was demanding too much from the boy, but it's thanks to the master's cloak that he can endure all of this. Still, she offered him tea to relieve his fatigue. In that sense, he is very different from the master, who hated anything physically exhausting. He used to solve all his problems with magic, and complained about every physical effort he made. Ayun understood that with the mastery of magic the master had, it was normal for him not to like that kind of thing. While they were there, Elena had a few more things to say. She is grateful to the successor for trying so hard, but his training has come to an end. Thanks to him, she really enjoyed the experience of teaching and feels immense gratitude. Ever since she started waiting for the successor, she knew that her time with him, would eventually end. Ayul started to feel confused by this feeling of farewell. Once his role was over, the page of destruction would disappear, she and the entire forest. This was a promise she had made with the master. Ayul immediately grew worried upon understanding the truth. But Elena asked him not to be sad. Everything was meant to disappear one day, and now it was time to say goodbye. Ayul felt that he still had so much to tell her. His progress would not have been possible without that woman's efforts, and she revealed that she was grateful that he was the successor, with her only regret being that she could not witness his development to its greatest heights. As she faded away, she told him not to falter in the face of difficulties and challenges, and to never give up. Elena's hands could no longer be felt. She asked him to take care of Mimir because she gets lonely easily. Ayul promised he would do as she asked. This was an eternal farewell, a pain he had never felt before, a sorrow difficult to overcome. Her last words were of congratulations because he had reached the 3rd circle and she finally disappeared. Her page no longer existed in that book. He was sent back to his room, and the first thing he did was check if the page was still there. Despite the farewell, he is eternally grateful to Elena. He will always treasure the days of training in the forest in his heart. Inside the Blue Tower, they were already gathered on the training grounds. There was not much time left before the duel began. Sun-chan, who was also there, could not hide his anxiety. And the patriarch asked what the odds of his son's victory were. While the leader of the Blue Tower spoke with the patriarch, Sun-chan wondered how he had ended up between these two people. It would be much better for him if Adella were there, but she was closer to the arena to provide moral support. The two were discussing the battle, and the leader of the Magic Tower recalled the patriarch's question. To him, the probability of victory was only 10%, because he knew the skills of the person he had chosen. That probability was different from what the patriarch had imagined, which piqued Kim's curiosity. The father of the year believed his son's probability of victory was negative, and used all the optimism he had to reach that conclusion. After hearing his opinion, Chin asked what Sun-chan thought would happen. He asked the boy to set aside his friendship with the protagonist and think objectively, to contemplate the real truth in his heart. He looked at his friend reflecting on it, reaching the conclusion that the probability of victory was 50%. Chin thought that estimate was too optimistic and wanted to know what led him to think that way. Sun-chan revealed that there was nothing in particular, but he was sure that if his friend gave it his all, those would be the odds, because he had been developing at an impressive speed and had never shown his full power. Kim became very interested in the claim that Ayul had still never fought with all his strength. The secretary announced that the protective wards had been duly checked and that now the match would begin. Soon they would start fighting. The man chosen to be his opponent remained very calm. Adella returned to a good spot to watch the fight, finding Sun-chan, who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. The opponents calmly sized each other up, and the official instructed them to take their positions. The man said he had not expected to face a prodigy, and our protagonist asked him to go easy on him. Finally, the duel would begin. The man gave the protagonist the advantage of the first move, who accepted the offer kindly. In one hand he prepared his wind magic, and in the other, a fireball. He is determined to put all his power into this first attack. That man is impressed, as this is the magic the rumors speak of. Truly fascinating. Our protagonist warned that he was too relaxed, but the man assured him that this was a situation where he could afford to be. Our protagonist appreciated his stance and was curious to see how long he could maintain it, launching his attacks toward him. The man waited patiently to be hit, saying that it was truly impressive. All the spells seemed the same, but some were faster, and others followed confusing trajectories, which made them very difficult to dodge. If the fifth circle spell were to attack him this way, the result could be catastrophic, but he remained calm, executing his defensive barrier, making sure that it would not be enough, creating a large barrier that blocked all those attacks. After they all hit the target, all that remained was smoke inside the arena. Our protagonist realized that the fifth circle defense easily ignored his attacks, but its weakness was that the summoned entity is also isolated, and his opponent cannot stop him from approaching. It had left a large opening for him to approach, and the man soon realized that was his true intention. He said that it would not change the outcome of things, but our protagonist disagreed. He finally managed to place his hands on the barrier, and using interference began to crack it, leaving his opponent completely surprised. Not even his friends expected something like that. The power he was exerting on that barrier widened its cracks. Both Qin and the patriarch were also intently watching the outcome of this. Ayul managed to do what he wanted, stating that it was already too late. He had precisely calculated the time needed for the interference. Accelerating the process, he changed the trajectory of his flames and wind, causing a great storm of fire in the space enclosed by the barrier. Pieces of the magic shield flew all over the arena. Adella could not believe what she was seeing. Sunchan was also stunned. The absolute barrier had been destroyed. Ayul wished his opponent had let his guard down for just one more moment. That would have made his life easier. He is relaxed, he is very good, but being careless is always the biggest mistake. That is what the master of the Blue Tower taught him. When the outer shield was broken, he was able to conjure another defense. Our protagonist realized that the battle would continue, and the man said it was his turn to take the offensive. Ayul was already prepared to react to the attack. He had received information about that man, knowing that he strengthens his body, and that he has a great curiosity about it, new magic, and that his specialty is fire magic, so he was already prepared for close quarters combat with fire. The mage advanced quickly toward the protagonist, noticing his interest in his magical techniques. That man watched him closely. He wouldn't aim for any vital points. Still, he had no interest in going easy on him. Ayul predicted where he would be attacked. His right side would be the target of that fire sword. He barely managed to dodge the first attack. Even so, his arm was superficially cut, but there was no time to get distracted. Ayul managed to counterattack with a punch to the stomach and, although it was strong, the man had to contain the sudden urge to go to the bathroom. That was enough for Ayul to gain a bit more distance, earning praise from his opponent, who noticed the boy could react quickly. Ayul said he has knowledge of close-range combat, distance. Knowing this, his opponent began to change the magic he held in his hands, as it is part of his strategy to adjust his combat style by analyzing his enemy. He said the young man's future is truly terrifying. Even though he is only a third circle mage, he is dangerous, so he is going to change his fighting stance and has decided to use everything he has. After summoning massive flames, he made fire rain from the sky. One of the privileges of fifth circle mages is the ability to use area of effect annihilation magic. Being a third circle mage, our protagonist wouldn't be able to defend against that. His opponent believes the end of the battle has come, causing our protagonist to activate his AliExpress Sharingan. He wouldn't let victory slip away and, using resonance, he began to gather water with his hands, creating a large shield to protect himself. This left his opponent confused, because it shouldn't be effective against the attack he had launched. The water vapor obscured the view of the spectators. His friends were worried, since they couldn't see anything. Kim knows that this magic should be from the third circle, but judging by the result, it seemed stronger. Our protagonist's father remains silent, as he still doesn't know whether to cheer for him or root against him. Inside the arena, they can't see anything, at least not unless you have the divine eye. The man believes that Ayul's vision is also obscured by the circumstances. Little does he know that he is already being coldly observed. The boy can see absolutely everything. Precisely identifying the mana from the fire sword, he starts moving toward the man, who managed to hear the approaching footsteps, and reacted quickly with his fire sword, but he was taken by surprise from his blind spot. Our protagonist was wielding a lightning spear, and he had no idea how the boy had gotten so close, so fast. He considered using the absolute shield, but since it had already been broken once, it would be risky. Only one option remained. Ayul saw the color of that mana. It was yellow, a sign that his opponent would try something else. Placing his hands on the ground, he raised an earth wall to protect himself, and the boy needed to act fast to prevent that barrier from fully forming. Stabbing his spear into the ground, he prevented the earth from materializing, and the glare from his lightning spear blinded the man again, buying our protagonist some time to make his move. Hit his own hands with flames, allowing him to maintain his offensive. Everything was too fast. The man needed to act. But Ayun saw the color of the mana again. He identified blue. He was superficially hit by water projectiles. Still, he didn't abort his attack, which was already underway. The impact of his fire magic clashed with the water shield. Once again, the resulting steam clouded everyone's vision, and the man found himself temporarily blinded by it. That situation was starting to irritate him. Realizing it was the boy's trick, he said that his ploys would end there. Ayun reacted quickly, placing his hand on the ground. He needed to enter the essence of the magic to find its gaps. That way, magic would cease to be magic, and he used the technique he had learned in the forest. His opponent realized that the magic he had summoned vanished before his eyes. Ayun said that the moment victory seems certain is when the battle becomes truly dangerous, creating a large whirlwind inside the arena. The official said it was over and that the winner would be declared. Ayun emerged victorious from that brief confrontation. After all that action, he was very exhausted. Kim was already waiting for the boy, acknowledging that the match had been truly incredible. Ayun closed the waiting room door. He didn't want to talk at that moment, but Kim opened it anyway, saying he had no words to express how pleased he was. He understood that the boy's strategy was to nullify magic. It was like watching a chess match, and he got chills just thinking about it. He really wanted to know what that final spell had been, and was curious how he managed to get around the limits of memorization. Ayun asked him if he would believe he did it using alteration, but we know that's a lie. Kim said he believes that version, he can even understand everything up to the third circle. But from the fourth circle, things changed completely. He didn't improve his memorization, he completely eliminated its flaws. It's an impossible contradiction, which left our boy speechless. Summoning something so quickly is truly masterful. Furthermore, he was able to nullify his opponent's magic, which made Kim even more curious. The boy hesitates to reveal the truth to him, so he needs to make up some story. At the headquarters of the Blue Tower, Kim is still pensive. He's in his office with his secretary. They are deciding which artisans will be the engineers for this year's Olympiad. His secretary is in charge of that task. The priority is not to delay current projects. He asked her what she thinks of all this, but the woman didn't understand the question. Kim can't stop thinking about our protagonist and is starting to believe that a gold medal is a possibility. She said the result isn't impossible, but he reminded her that just the day before, she barely believed in a bronze medal, and his secretary said that things had changed a lot in a single day. Kim realized that she is also very impressed. While she was focusing on her work, she said it had truly been amazing. He said he even forgot that she was the referee of the match, and the woman asked him not to bother her. Despite the jokes, Kim is still trying to understand what kind of magic the boy uses. The woman asked him if he had watched the match using the ruby eyes, and he confirmed that he had, and he had done. Even so, he still couldn't understand everything. The fog hid some things, or there must have been some kind of protection. It's a bit scary, if it's true. He tries to accept what happened, but he still can't understand how he was able to destroy that magic circle. The secretary became thoughtful and worried. Not even the ruby eyes could see everything. Kim is so curious that he asked the boy directly in the waiting room. It was when they met before. Ayun said he had already told him last time, but he also has his own secrets and can't reveal everything about his magic and was advised to find out for himself. The secretary asked what he would do if it were something illegal, but he is sure it's not. The structure and purity of the mana corroborate his point of view. There's only one thing out of place in all this. The boy said he had perfected memorization with transformation magic, and he is sure the boy doesn't use that. Still, this year's Olympics will be very interesting. Quickly changing the subject, he asked the woman if she would like to go out to eat. While smiling at him, she asked if he would consider that overtime. Inside the academy dormitory, the boy's alarm clock wouldn't stop ringing. He can't get out of bed. His whole body is sore. He slept 8 hours straight, and maybe he feels this way because he used disassembly on the resonance circle. He can't use his own mana to resonate, making the master's cloak useless. He recognized that he needs to be more cautious and remained seated on his bed. Only then did he notice what was on his phone. He had received a message from his father just then, wondering if the boy must be exhausted. He got medical assistance and advised him to focus on his own recovery. Who would have thought? Once again, the best father in the galaxy making his star shine. His father left the duel without speaking to him, which worried him a lot. But now he knows everything is fine. He is regaining his father's trust again, and there is little time left for the Olympics. Ayun returned once more inside the book, being greeted by Mimir, who was very happy. He said he won the battle and that it was very easy, but that is not what his facial expression says. Ayun revealed that it wasn't easy, and that if his plan had gone wrong, he definitely would have lost, and that he only had the advantage thanks to the information he got from the master of the Blue Tower. But he knows he needs to train again. He wants a book about the fourth circle, about the expansion ring. The fourth magic circle is expansion, and she gathered all the necessary books for him to understand the subject. He must read all those books that were presented to him. In the classroom, the students are receiving instructions about I, and must write a text about it. But among them is someone who completely ignores this information. It's our protagonist, and he continues to reflect on the expansion circle. It is fundamentally different from the previous circles. The first three overlap like petals, but the fourth circle envelops them all, making the previous circles more stable in form. This significantly increases the efficiency of the magic, even eliminating the disadvantages of the deliberation circle, reducing the mental exhaustion and increasing the duration of the resonance. His penalty is also reduced, which makes using disassembly easier. Even the divine eye will be put to better use from now on. But since it's a completely new structure, joining all these circles won't be an easy task. And currently this is his biggest challenge, because according to one of the books he had read, it will take at least 1 year to master all of this. He already knew it would be difficult, but he didn't expect it to take so long. And he doesn't have much time left before the competition. Ayul and his friends are once again in the Academy's training room. He is timing them on the treadmill. They need to run for 5 more minutes. Sun-chan is sweating so much it looks like he's running in the rain. The girl, on the other hand, remains unfazed. Once they complete that exercise, they will rest for 10 minutes. Sun-chan seems to be on the verge of contemplating his own demise. Adella went over to the boy to help him and he was quite surprised by this action. She said they had all promised to push themselves harder each time, and in fact, that was exactly what happened the night after the battle with Ambok. Ayul was completely exhausted from that event. He couldn't train with his friends. Sun-chan even tried to convince him to train that day by making the protagonist remember his own words. Adella realized what was happening and said that she was also tired, suggesting they should rest. Sun-chan was the only one who tried to stop that from happening, reminding them that the best part of training happens when they're exhausted. That's how his friend had indoctrinated him, who now seemed to have forgotten his own words. Ayul got very annoyed by that, but if the reason was crap, his friend would already be drowning in it. He said he really couldn't forget that mentality, warning him that the next day's training would be even more agonizing. Sun-chan realized what was about to happen and suggested the protagonist go get some rest. So, Ayul dragged the boy to train some more. As they walked through the city, Sun-chan realized that a genius is still a genius. His initial strategy hadn't worked in combat, but he was still able to come up with something completely new. That's the most impressive part about the protagonist. And he asked Adella if he had always been like that when they were kids. The girl said that the only thing that had changed was that he was a bit younger. Sun-chan wanted to know if he was more immature, and she said exactly that. Actually, he was always a very optimistic person, and used to underestimate his own abilities. But she also behaved like that, and having him as a rival never changed that behavior, and each time she's growing to like him more, realizing that she is increasingly fascinated by the protagonist's techniques. Sun-chan has a hard time believing his friend used to be like that. Everything changed when he entered the academy. He realized that being incompatible with the AI wasn't a curse, but a blessing in disguise. Adella was very surprised by that statement, and the boy said he didn't mean it in a weird way, saying that geniuses always have a particular kind of arrogance, and that's what makes them grow beyond their limits. And his friend is not an arrogant person. Being incompatible with the AI was what caused this. Adella asked if he was assuming he improved because of that flaw, and that's the conclusion he drew from these events. But she thinks their friend might get upset if he hears him, but she's happy that he found his own path and that it's working, leaving the girl completely speechless. She said that they should also strive to do their best, showing that she's following the same path as him. They are going to push themselves to the limit for this Olympiad, and the girl promised that they would try harder and harder to win. That's exactly what was happening while they were talking. Our protagonist looked at Sun-chan, who wanted to know why he had asked him that question. Ayun handed him a bottle of water, telling him that he had worked hard. Apparently, he delivers both the sickness and the cure with the same hand. Our protagonist said he never made his friends sick, but that wasn't what he was talking about. Adella, it seems, is a strong candidate for kidney stones, since she doesn't drink water and is always with that banana smoothie. Now they need to get back to their special training. Adella and Sun-chan are now on their break. Our protagonist approached her and asked if they could talk for a moment. The girl looked at him with interest, and they went outside to talk about it in private. The team for the Olympiad had already been decided, and he wanted to restructure their training. Starting the next day, they could skip some classes to put the training into practice. Although the academy was providing them with training, Ayun believed that 8 hours wouldn't be enough. That's why he wanted to change some things. In the mornings, they would have meetings to define their strategic approach. In these meetings, they would analyze every event that would happen in the Olympiad. That way they could understand what was needed to win, and also get used to the new rules for that year. Adella found the suggestion interesting, but she wanted to know why only the two of them were talking about it. Ayun said that their friend was already overloaded with physical training and too tired to listen. They also needed to analyze the foreign competitors, and the Blue Tower team was already doing that. And starting the next day, they would start implementing those changes. But the girl had something to say. She agreed with the theoretical part, but she didn't know if the older students would listen to them. Our protagonist didn't even see that as a problem, because there are ways to deal with that. The next day, they were ready to train. Sunchan wanted to know if his teammates weren't nervous about it, and they said there was no reason to be nervous. Only then did Sunchan reveal his concern. Other than the three of them, the rest of the students were third years, but his teammates didn't care about this at all. Adella said she would show them who's going to win, and a girl overheard this, saying that she's more arrogant than the rumors say. The rest of the students had also gathered to train. Among them was a silver-haired guy named Kang, a generic-looking guy with glasses who looks like that kid from Digimon, but his name is Jinsei, and a red-haired girl, possibly one-eyed. Her name is difficult, so let's just call her the one-eyed girl. This same girl approaches the protagonist's group, wanting to know how they plan to beat them in the competition. She asked Adella to repeat that in front of her, saying how she was going to beat them. And that's exactly what she did, saying that there isn't a single third-year student capable of beating her, which left Sunchan quite worried, who started apologizing on her behalf. He said that his friend was crazy, but Adella said she was telling the truth. That only made the situation even more tense. Our protagonist tried to act friendly and apologized for the commotion they were causing, asking if it would be okay to have a friendly match between the two teams. He knows he needs to dominate the entire team if he wants to lead them during the Olympics. The silver-haired guy understood where he was going with this. It would be 3 from their team against the protagonist's team. The one-eyed girl wants to be included in this, as she wants to teach the protagonist's future love interest to be more humble. Just then, our protagonist said they had misunderstood his proposal. It's a match between all the third-year students against his team. The one-eyed girl was so angry she almost had a stroke, while Sunchan's soul had already left his body. The silver-haired guy asked what the protagonist's real intention was in proposing something like that, because he knows they wouldn't provoke them without a purpose. There must be a reason for this. Ayul had seen that guy a few times during his childhood. He's from the Sinmu family and is still as cautious as ever. Our protagonist said he has no motive, but that it's the best way to learn everyone's skills. The guy with glasses got very irritated by this, saying that the rookie wants to try and take them down using his skills. The silver-haired guy realized that the protagonist's intention is to establish control over them, and the Premium Plus Extra tried to intimidate our protagonist by saying his hypothesis is correct, but Ayul doesn't flinch for a single moment. The one-eyed girl said that they are very arrogant and that her patience has a limit. She knows they're talented, but they can't disrespect their seniors. If it were a one-on-one battle, maybe they'd have a chance to win, but against 7 students at once, that's practically impossible. They wouldn't be able to beat them, especially when their team has a weakling like that. Those words hit our poor, tired friend's ego hard, while the protagonist and Adella remained unfazed. The one-eyed girl said it would be okay just this once, that they just had to apologize, and she would ignore it. And the silver-haired guy warned that they had crossed a line, and that they shouldn't have done that, but our protagonist didn't care about those words. He said they are too noisy, while being constantly watched by the silver-haired guy. The protagonist's best friend was already completely terrified by this whole interaction. Ayul told them to shut up and start fighting immediately, because he was going to show them how to smash the like button on this video. What did you guys think of this story? I hope you liked it, and until the next video, take care.